Uhuru. Uhuru, comrades. So we're here for our second day of the APSP membership convention. On yesterday, we had a great day. We did the mass face of the party. We did a lot of information, of course, we got from the chairman in his overview, really explaining the world. And I want to take this moment to welcome everyone back to the second day. And also, I want to introduce the most recent member of the African People's Socialist Party, Vince Lawrence. Can you stand there? Vince was a founding member of the African People's Socialist Party back in 1972, and I think this is a really, he's come back around home to us. I think this is really great, really great. So I look forward to working with Vince and building in Fort Myers where you are. Uhuru. So the chairman is going to be doing another overview. We kind of joked around yesterday and said he should have had an hour and a half on yesterday. And I thought that it was so profound on yesterday. If he needs to go over the half hour today, he certainly can use some of that time to fill in some of the blanks that he felt like he might have missed on yesterday. So with no further ado, I want to introduce the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, so join me in welcoming him. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrades. Uhuru. 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 Thank you, Comrade Chimaringa, for extending the time. And what I wanted to do is just say how much we appreciate seeing our brother and dear comrade Vince Lawrence back with us. It's a statement of the durability of the African People's Socialist Party. The fact is that I probably started working with Vince Lawrence maybe 47 years or more ago with Comrade Lawrence Mann, who was the co-founder of the party, who led an organization called the Black Rights Fighters down in Fort Myers. And they did a lot of work with migrant workers. They did other things as well, but that was something that moved us a lot and that informed us a lot. We learned a lot as a consequence of that connection with what was happening to our brothers, particularly, and sisters who were involved in this migrant stream. Many people didn't know it, but at one time, the agriculture was the largest industry in the state of Florida. And there was a tremendous migrant stream of Africans who were coming from Haiti, from Jamaica, from other places in the islands, and moving not just to southern Florida, but throughout the United States in this migrant stream. But there was a concentration in sections of southern Florida. And Vince Lawrence worked with an incredible leader, Lawrence Mann, who was the co-founder of our party, and was a relatively quiet and easygoing kind of brother, but it was deep and profound. They're always saying that, what is it, that still waters run deep? That was exemplified with Lawrence Mann, and Vince was always there. And as I understand it, Lawrence at one time decided that they had to have a newspaper or some kind of news organ and assigned Vince to be the photographer. And so never having done it really before, he hasn't put down a camera since that time, so many years ago. So I just think it's really important to see Vincent here. He's been with us, even though he has not formally he had not formally joined the party, I guess, but he had never unjoined either. You know, so it's not like he ever quit the party or something like that, you know. And you know, I'd see him in our studies, and I would see him from time to time on something, some communique online and what have you. And then, of course, as you know, he was at our Congress, and he took a slew of extraordinary photos at the Congress. And I said, you know, when you're coming home? And he said, I've been thinking about it. You know, so he's here. He's here today. And so we have all kinds of rules for recruitment. We've been talking about them. We went all over them yesterday. But we also we employ democratic centralism in the party, which is the dictatorship of the working class inside the organization. So Vince coming in. No, that's just the way that is. Vince is coming in. So I really want to express appreciation to all of you. And some of you traveled to be here on yesterday and were not in the meeting because it was a party and cadre-wide meeting on yesterday. And I appreciate your patience in being able to stay overnight to be with us on today. And for some of you, it's the last time you won't be in a party meeting because we plan to have you in the party as well. And that's for real. So what we're talking about is the mass work that our party is involved in general terms. We're talking specifically about mass organizations that are organization of the African People's Socialist Party. That would include the African National Women's Organization, an incredibly significant organization. We cannot say too much about that. Speaking of that, they're involved in a major campaign. They have been for a while now. The Arrest CPS, I think it's called, the Childhood Protective Services. They call it by different names in different states, in different countries, in fact. We've had this fight in London, and this fight is one that we could have had in Haiti, where we've seen our children kidnapped by white people and missionaries and things like that. And it happens throughout this country. Our party was once involved in California in a fierce struggle with the foster care system, where African children were being kidnapped by the hundreds, thousands, and I mean this in a literal sense. They would take our children. Sometimes they would, upon a woman giving birth, an African woman giving birth, if they found drugs in her system, they would take the baby. They would take the baby. And we had situations where they would give these children to these foster care institutions and persons. There was one foster care institution that had at least 900 beds. And all of these, they were run by white women, white people, white corporations who made all kinds of money from taking our children. There was one notorious case that we were involved in California. Somebody tell me the name of the woman. Yvonne Eldridge, who was she was a foster care parent, a white woman who would actually take African babies to doctors and have doctors do things like remove their spleen and commit other kinds of horrible acts on them because they got paid more for taking the children if there was some kind of ailment, if the child had some kind of ailment. And eventually this woman was charged. She was arrested and charged. And her defense was this mysterious thing, Munchausen by proxy disease, they call it. And it's supposedly a disease that afflicts someone who just have these insane desires to go to doctors. And so they're saying that it was this need to go to doctors all the time that had this woman doing these things to our children. They said there were other people who do similar things. But what was striking was she had some children of her own that were white. And the disease never made her take her white children to the doctors to have the spleen removed and this kind of thing. So our children, our families, our people, our community, it's a continuation of a whole process of slavery. And we see it in so many different ways. There was reports in California of white women who would take African babies, take little African baby girls, and would do things like put, what do you call it when you do stuff to your hair that makes it straight? Relaxer in a baby's hair, or shave the child's head, a girl's head, because they didn't know what to do with an entire bowl on a bald head. And then, of course, we've seen this notorious stuff of the rich white women who go to Africa, go to Haiti, go to all of these places, and they are so benevolent that they kidnap our children and call it adoptions. And they are held up in high esteem because they do this. And we protest that mightily, but in our own communities on a regular basis, every day, all around this country, our children are being taken by these so-called protective service agencies. And this is a real struggle that we're involved in. And the thing is that when they take them, the mothers are not seen as victims, generally speaking. The mothers are seen as the problems who do horrible things to our children. Even in our own communities, people look at the mothers whose children have been taken as some kind of criminal. This is not even to suggest that sometimes mothers, African mothers, will abuse a child or something like that. But African mothers, like African people, live under colonial domination. And we don't have normal relationships. We don't have normal, there's no such thing as a normal relationship under colonialism. No colonized person has a normal relationship. And as quiet as it's kept, no colonizer has a normal relationship. All our relationships are distorted by colonialism. And so if we have situations, I've seen situations where African mothers with children would leave the child with the oldest child, who may only be 8. And that's never been a problem, because I've been to places like Gainesville, Florida, and Archer, Florida, where I've seen 3- and 4-year-old children involved in peanut harvesting and filled with dirt and stuff like that, and it was no crime for them to use 8-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old children. And we know of 3- and 4-year-old children right now in the mines and cocoa plantations all over Africa. So white people ain't got no concern about an 8-year-old child taken care. But the thing is, and the crime is that somebody sees the child and say that it's a problem because the child went to a club, the mother went to a club or something else to that effect. And mothers want to go to clubs too. You go to a club. You go to all kinds of clubs. Mothers want to go to clubs too. Mothers want to have real experience. We got a situation where perhaps almost half the African children in our communities in single and parent families where a single mother is responsible for it. And regardless of what Barack Obama has said about African fathers, reality is that 1 out of every 8 human beings in prison in the world is an African man in the United States of America. There's a reason for it. There's an ongoing aggression under colonialism. But what I want to do is, this question has come up in the African National Women's Organization that I was talking about of whether or not it's possible for the solidarity movement to play some kind of role in attacking this assault on our families by stealing our children through this institution. And I think it's something I would like for people to mull over, to give some thought to, because we did that with the cases fighting around the foster care situation in California. We were able to do that, and we should give some thought to that. Because these sisters don't need to just be out there by themselves, and this community, the attack on the families in that fashion is not only the removal of the children, but it's also an ideological assault on the African community. Somehow we can't take care of our children. And in my lifetime, I remember we took care of the white people's children. White women didn't have to take care of no babies because African women did it. And so I just think it's something that we need to be able to take on. In fact, during the rebellion here in 1996, I never forget, this white reporter came up to me in tears, white man, who talked about him growing up and that the only love he got was from this black nannies. You didn't call them nannies, you know. But this African woman who took care of him, she was the one who took care of him. She was the one who showed him whatever kind of love and what have you that he got. Of course, it didn't mean a damn thing to him until this rebellion happened here, and the African people had stood up again and made him have to reflect on his own history in this relationship. So we're talking about organizations like the African National Women's Organization. That's really important, and we need to build that organization. We're talking about an organization like the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, which will be the public's face of our party in so many ways. This is where you will see most of the struggles coming from our communities throughout the world will be coming from the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. I want to also ask people to keep me abreast of how we're looking in terms of people, particularly in Africa, the comrades in Africa and other places outside the United States are participating in this meeting. I just think it's really important to have an idea of, because they're going and grappling with some of the same issues and questions that we're having here around membership. And there are other mass organizations, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. What did I leave out in terms of our mass organizations? APDEP, All African People's Development and Empowerment Project. What did I leave out in terms of mass organizations? ANRO, the African, well, we haven't consolidated the African National Reparations Organization on the African National Prisons Organization yet, but we will. But we want to be talking about the mass organizations. And we talk about how the mass organization really represent the face of the party. It's the party in another face, I should say. And what gives significance to the mass organizations is something that all of us should understand, because there are all kinds of groups, or there are several kinds of groups that do work that we could consider mass work. They protest this, they protest that. They do Saturday schools, provide some kind of educational thing. They do small projects and sometimes larger projects that are supposed to be creating some kind of economic opportunities in the African community. You see a lot of forces doing all kinds of things. But what is really important is for us to understand what the hell it is we are, what it is that we are doing. And the critical thing to be understood is that what we are talking about are organizations of a revolutionary party. That this is the party in a different face, even though it hasn't become necessary for somebody to join the party. Even though our mass organizations may often be comprised of people who do not consider themselves revolutionaries, just people who want to work in this institution, who want to volunteer with Black Power Blueprint because they see economic development happening over here, or who may want to work with dealing with this crisis in the school system, how children are being brutalized, or who just might want to work with what's happening to the children because of the child protective service agencies or something like that. That might be the thing that attracts them to us. They might not consider themselves revolutionaries, but the organizations are revolutionary organizations. And they are revolutionary organizations precisely because they are organizations of the African People's Socialist Party who has developed a strategy to overturn our oppression. The primary contradiction in the whole world today, the primary contradiction in the entire world today is the contradiction between oppressed and oppressor nations. That is the contradiction around which every other contradiction revolves. The relationship between oppressed and oppressor nations. And what this means is that if you look at this relationship that we define as essentially as colonialism, among the people from the oppressor nations, from white people, you see contradictions, even among the white people. That's what we hear about most of the time. When you read the newspaper, when you see Me Too, when you see all of this stuff, they are dealing with the contradictions between the oppressed, the people of the oppressed nation. Are you with me on that? That's what they're talking about. It doesn't mean that African women are not oppressed. It means that among the oppressed nations, there are contradictions, and among the oppressor nation, there are contradictions. But all the contradictions between the oppressed nation, within the oppressed nation and the oppressor nation rely on this primary contradiction, this main contradiction that exists between the oppressor nation and the oppressed nation. All of them revolve around that. Get rid of the relationship between the oppressed nation and the oppressor nation, then you have the basis for destroying all these contradictions. There are contradictions in everything. You can't see anything where there is no contradiction. Contradiction is the basis for the existence of things, right? But in all things, there is a primary contradiction, a main contradiction. It's not that we go out and fight all the contradictions all the time. No, there is a main contradiction around which all the others revolve. This is the main contradiction that every other contradiction relies on for its existence. So that's why we say we target this relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor nation. And the party recognizes that. And the party is attacking this relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor nations, and we open up 1,000 different doors for everybody to join in on attacking this relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor nation, even if you're moving into this, dealing with a contradiction that is peculiar to your own situation. The party has pulled it all together, has consolidated all of this struggle in the attack on this primary relationship. That's why we can have an African People's Solidarity Committee, an NPDUM, all these other things under the leadership of the African working class that's making a major assault on the primary contradiction that exists between oppressed and oppressor nations. Y'all with me on that? Yeah. And this is what we must understand, because you can't leave this work and then go someplace else and do what you do here. It's impossible. Nobody else does what we do. Nobody else is connected to overturning a social system that can bring happiness to the people of the world, that can return all the resources, that can make it unnecessary for each of us to be hiding from each other, that makes it impossible for us to be able to stand squarely and look each other in the eye as equal human beings. Nobody's doing that. Nobody is resolving this profound contradiction that's got Africans starving to death on the richest continent in the world. Nobody else is doing that. Nobody else has any work that's happening in any community in the world that's taking that on, except us. This is what you are connected with when you come into the mass work of the party. I just think it's really important to understand that. And once you understand that the main contradiction in the whole world is that between oppressed nations and oppressor nations, it also helps you to understand the significance of this profound crisis that's happening in the world. What is the basis of this crisis in the world? It is a challenge to this primary contradiction between the oppressed and the oppressor nation. In Afghanistan, in Syria, all over Africa. You see South America. This is why they're attacking Venezuela if they can. This is why they're attacking people in Palestine. This is why they continue to murder people in Syria and Afghanistan. This is why they are concerned about what happens throughout South America. This is why they're concerned about what happens in your community. This is why they're saying, get all the niggas out of the United States or out of France, all these other places. This primary contradiction is a thing that is being shaken. This is the assault that's being made on this relationship between oppressed and oppressor nations. So, we created an organization, a revolutionary party, and to liberate our people and to take on this primary contradiction between oppressed and oppressor nations. And then because we know what the main contradiction is, we can do with all the other contradictions as well. We can say, how do we challenge, how do we channel masses of people who are trying to deal with these secondary contradictions? How do we channel all of that into an assault on the main contradiction, which is the only way that we will find some kind of lasting happiness for all the people? Because even if you stop the crisis with what's happening with child protective services, we still gonna catch hell. There is no way in hell for homosexuals to be free and everybody else unfree. It just won't work that way. So we say that the primary contradiction is what we target. We target the primary contradiction. In the process of doing that, we take on child care protective services. We take on the question of the oppression of homosexuals. We take on the question of the oppression of women. Everybody, because all of us are part of the same body of humanity that's being stressed and attacked by a social system that revolves around the primary contradiction of the relationship between the oppressed and oppressor nations. So, and there are a lot of contradictions in the world, and I'm thrilled at seeing this crisis of imperialism. And some people are hiding under their beds because they're talking about how crazy Trump is acting. You hear it all the time. You go in the supermarket, the checkout person, and they're buying a newspaper, look at the news, oh, Trump is so crazy. They just canceled the Tampa Bay Times, just canceled one of the regular cartoons. I think it's called Non Sequitur. I think it's supposed to be like an adult kind of cartoon or something like that. Because last Sunday, the cartoon had some kind of message hidden in it that said, F Trump. You understand? And so about, they have something like 700 and some odd newspapers that receive this around the country, and 110 have already discounted, they've got rid of it now because they said F Trump. And that was immature and all these other things. But the bigger problem, of course, is not Trump. Trump is a revelation, is something like, a symptom. He is an expression of the crisis of imperialism. I mean, white power never would have voluntarily put Trump there. If only because he exposes them too much. He shows the rot of the social system, makes it so obvious. They would much rather not have Trump there. Obama was a much better white candidate, white president. So less obvious, so smooth and collected, so unexcitable, so unblack. And they needed an unblack person, that kind of thing. So the system is experiencing severe stress. And we have to build this movement. And we also have the advantage of being led by an organization with a philosophy. And that's really important. With an acknowledged philosophy, with a definitive philosophy, because everybody's got a philosophy, whether you know it or not. Usually what the philosophy most people run around with is the philosophy of the bourgeoisie. Because the philosophy is simply, you know, your worldview. It's how you see and understand your place and destiny in the world. Some of it's biblical, right? You know, the Bible says that the poor will always be with us. That's a philosophy. That's a philosophy. That's a worldview. If the poor will always be with us, what the hell am I doing here, right? Shit, I just, why get a job? You understand? You know, everybody has a philosophy. Everybody's working with a philosophy. But the ruling class has this select group of people that's created institutions and where people churn out philosophy that represents the worldview of the ruling class, and then it's pumped to everybody, all kinds of institutions. Every time you go to a movie or theater, you are fed philosophy, and when you look at the comic books or the newspaper comic strips, you get philosophy too. That's why you cannot say F Trump in the comic book, because that's not the philosophy that you're supposed to have, right? And so everybody has a philosophy. And it's the philosophy of the ruling class. It's the ones that control the society. Can you imagine a ruler that would promote and create a philosophy that's opposed to its interests? That's crazy. That's crazy. That's why you will never hear, you remember how they used to say that they didn't want Africans to learn how to read and do this and that under colonial slavery? Of course not. Because they wanted to keep us locked into the philosophy, not just broad philosophy of the ruling class, but specific philosophy of the ones who were dominating us all the time, boy. I mean, so we locked into this situation, and everybody's locked into it. So when you talk about fighting for freedom, you have to be clear, what is your worldview? What is the philosophy that guides it? You have to be clear on this question. And most of us aren't. We take it for granted. It's like air. You don't say, is this CO2 or how much, you know, oxygen versus, I mean, you just take it for granted. That's how it is. You grow up into a system that gives the impression of having always been like this. So it's not like people running around looking for philosophers. Most of the time, under certain duress, we do it though, don't we, Abdullah? We look for a philosophy. We got to find something that explains this stuff. Yeah. Most instances, though, what we do is look for a philosophy that help us to challenge the status quo without overturning the status quo. Yeah. And that they will give us, you can find all kinds of philosophies that will help you to challenge the status quo without overturning the status quo. That won't give you the weapons to overturn the relationship that you have. They will let you. Nat Turner was able to go out in the woods and try to prepare to kill all the white people because they thought he was going out there to practice Christianity. And Christianity was going to let them challenge the relationship but not overturn the relationship. Right? And Nat went out there, and of course he discovered something else. He said, I looked up in the sky, and I saw the white horses fighting with the black horses. And there was blood dropping from the leaves of the trees. And I heard a voice say to me, this you have been cursed to see. Yes. You've been cursed to see this. And then he went home, told people to strike at night and spare no one. Yes. God told him that. Yes. That was a worldview. That wasn't the one that they wanted him to have, but it was a worldview who was looking at philosophy. Try to find an explanation for the situation. He found it within the narrow confines that had been provided to him by the ruling class. They let you study the Bible, right? And so philosophy is really important. because it would tell whether you would struggle or not. I mean, you know, there's this worldview that says that the white people are mutations, or the white man is the devil. Now, I used to like that. And I said, if I was religious, that's what I want. I'm going to join them. I don't believe in the gods and all this other stuff they said, but they say the white man is the devil, and that's helpful. You understand? And especially when we've elevated God, the white man, to God, haven't we? Yes. Go to the church, the white Jesus there on the church wall. Go to the house, the white Jesus, Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. I mean, we've elevated the white man to God. Somebody said the white man is the devil. Oh, shit. I can get that. You understand? And so, but then what? So now you know the white man is the devil. What you do? I mean, that's what you're left with. How do you deal with it? Even that is permissible to say the white man is the devil. That was striking. They don't like it. They will not let you get on television to say that and stuff like that. But so what? So the white man is the devil. What do you do with the devil? What do you do? I mean, this is the real question that you're confronted with after that. Okay, we've explained the world. Now how do we change it? Get more religion? Build walls, get crosses, yeah, like Dracula, eat a lot of garlic. How do you deal with it, right? And then, you know, the white man is a mutation, you know, please. And the white man is different from the black man. Africans and white people you will find different, and then Asians and indigenous and all these people are different to some minor extent. But is that an explanation you have in this worldview? How does it inform you to change your circumstances, your relationship? This is really important. We say philosophy is important. Because if I believe the white man is the devil, I spend a lot of time in church. That becomes a kind of solution. I can become a geneticist if I think that there's a mutation, that these mutants are running everything. Or you're stuck in this situation of trying to explain the world. I'm an historical materialist. I understand that the world is the way it is because of human activity. Human activity, not genetic activity, not some modified, not monsters. People act in monstrous ways. People act inhumanely. But the only way you can define monster and inhumane is you start off with, there is something that should be what we consider human behavior, right? So we are faced with this, and how then, what is the essential thing about human activity? And we say that all human beings are trapped by the absolute necessity to produce and reproduce life. That is the primary activity of human beings. That is the social, that is the motive force of all human society, to produce and reproduce life. That is more important than any kind of religion, any kind of genetics, any kind of boogeyman, because you have to have life in order for any of this other stuff to mean anything. You have to be alive for it to mean anything. So this quest, this ongoing quest, of humans to produce and reproduce life is the fundamental thing. What are we talking about? When I was younger, we'd be talking about putting on a little Marvin Gaye and dimming the lights and say, can you come over for a few minutes, right? We didn't say, let's come over to reproduce life. But that was actually that was actually the motive force for doing it. In fact, we did have a certain name for certain kind of music, didn't we? That made a suggestion that's what it was about, right? We got to do that. If we don't do that, it's all over, right? And then the other aspect of producing life is the ever-developing capacity that human activity requires in being able to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. And this is an ongoing process of development that we start off perhaps with a rock that we chase a rabbit down to kill, skin for its fur, and eat for its food. That's a primitive way of doing that. Now, I don't know if most people know what a damn rabbit is. You understand? But the process is now developed to such a point that you don't have to do that. But you do have to do things. We move from a place where somebody might try to find an uninhabited cave to live in to creating our own caves that sometimes they are 24, 25, 30 stories high with an artificially created atmosphere in there. You can make it as hot as you want to make it and cold as you want to make it inside the place. This is a part of the process of developing the ability to produce and reproduce real life. Human beings are engaged in that all the time. That's what we do. That's human life. That's why, you know, I know there are religious people in the crew and who believe in miracles and things like that, and who said Jesus created a miracle because he did what I consider some politics and turning water to wine and doing stuff. They got like making the dead come to life, but you know, they got these defibrillators in every airport you go to. When people fall out, boom, hand them in the shot, alive, you understand? So, but for me, the real miracle would have been if he had made an airplane. Now that would have been a miracle. Or if he had made a washing machine, you understand? Or paved the damn street. I got off that donkey and then hopped in an automobile. That would have been a miracle. That is a miracle. You understand? That would have been miraculous. That would have been miraculous. Right? Don't you think that would have been miraculous? I think that would have been miraculous. I mean, you know, politics, you know, okay. So anyway, I don't even know how I got off on that. I believe that the people the lepers who were cured and the blind men, people made sight full again, I think they would have much preferred penicillin and something that was curing everybody. I mean, somebody just run around and then raise up one dead person. What the hell? Everybody dying, you know. The life expectancy. Gotta go to the graveyard and raise one person. How you think all the other dead people feel about that? Anyway, I'm going to leave that alone. Philosophy is important. See, and I mean this in a very serious way, because otherwise you don't develop penicillin. You don't develop the ability to cure people who are sick and stuff like that. You just go to Jimmy Swaggart. You just hang around the hotel room of Oral Roberts. If he's, well, he ain't alive no more, so I don't know how. But the point is that your philosophy will inform you what it is that you have to do to be free, and that's what it is we're about, right? So we have a philosophy. We're African internationalists. And we have come up with a worldview that's based on science. It is a scientifically developed worldview. Everybody got a philosophy, as we say, but not all philosophies are based on science. And what is it that helps us to understand that a philosophy is scientific? One of the things is that it's falsifiable. What do I mean by it's falsifiable? I don't mean that you can say it's false or not, but what I do mean is that it is a worldview that you can prove by eliminating the factors, the things that give it significance, and see if it still exists anymore. For example, if you say that water, liquid water, can turn into a gas by heating it to a certain temperature, and you know it does, right? You heat water to a certain temperature, the liquid turns into a gas that you call steam, right? Then you start with that premise. Or you say that liquid water can turn into a solid if you freeze it to a certain temperature. That's the theory that we start off with, that theory. You say, man, that ain't true. It's falsifiable, isn't it? You can take liquid water, put it on the stove, heat it, gas. That's falsifiable. If you heat it, and never turns to gas, boom, okay, throw that out. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's philosophy. Is you can characterize it scientifically in part because it's falsifiable. Did, in fact, a starving, disease-ridden, impoverished Europe leave Europe, go to Africa, kidnap black people, African people, and start a whole new economics off of that? Did the same Europeans leave a starving Europe and go to what we now call the Americas and other places in the world and kidnap them, put them to work for free, along with other African people, create a whole new economy that did not exist in the world before, that was based off a parasitic relationship between Europe and the rest of us? Did that happen or not? That is falsifiable. Our philosophy is based on looking at history, looking at real things that happen in the real world, and then coming to certain kinds of conclusions based on that. You with me on that? So if you come to that conclusion, if that's what built it, then you know what can take it down. If it relies on that relationship for its existence, then you know what can take it down. The question then becomes, do you want to take it down? Or do you want to find a place in it for yourself, despite the fact that it comes at the expense of the masses of African and oppressed peoples around the world? That's the question you are confronted with. You can be militantly opposed to how this system works. You can be militantly opposed because it doesn't let you in on it, because it leaves you out. And that's what we see. People are militantly, they become what they call revolutionaries. I saw people who were revolutionaries because America clearly offered no opportunities for black people to experience any kind of significance in the system. Then Barack Hussein Obama got selected as a new president, and people who I knew as revolutionaries throughout the 60s became imperialist supporters overnight. They made excuses for Obama, but what they actually said was, there, by the grace of God, go I. But by the grace of God, there go I. I can do it. My child can now be the president. It doesn't matter that the president presides over a brutal military force that's killing people around the world and starving people around the world. It doesn't matter that people in Venezuela are dying at this very moment through purposefully engineered starvation, or that African people in Fort Myers, in Canada, in Ghana, all over the world are starving to death. But I can get a piece of the action. I saw people and know them. I won't call their names. They're famous people, or were, when they were alive. They were brilliant. Some of them went to the best institutions that the white man had ever created. And they recognize some of them today as very brilliant people. But after all they did and came back, the white man wouldn't let them in because they were still niggers. This is what radicalized them. Not the plight of our people, but because they were locked out. And as smart as they were, and they were smart as the smartest white people who they knew. I knew people who left the Caribbean, coming to America, going to England, the mother countries as they characterized them. Because they were so limited and kept brilliant. And they get to the Caribbeans, and they was just niggas, suspects, sus, as we call them there. They were left out. They became radicalized, revolutionaries, hung out with communists that people know who've written great books, and they wrote great books themselves. But the radicalization was based on them being left out, not on the rest of us, you see? And so you can hate the way the system articulates itself in your life, but it doesn't mean that you have the identity with the rest of the people. We say that the African petty bourgeoisie as a social force will always betray the revolution. Always. The social force, the African petty bourgeoisie will betray the revolution. But there are individuals from that class who can commit class suicide. But what does class suicide mean? It means abandoning the interests of the petty bourgeoisie, the aspirations of the petty bourgeoisie, and uniting with the interests and aspirations of the working class. That's the question. So just to have this stuff about internationalists, I'm an internationalist, or you know, black this and black that, African Americanism, how can you be a hyphenated entity? Anyway, so we have philosophy. This organization that you're connected to, we have philosophy. This organization you're connected to is a revolutionary party, which is the highest expression of the will of the people, of the class, to seize and control power. We have a party. It's not something where we wish things get better and we go places and we make speeches about how bad the system is, and that's it. We have a party. The assumption is that this relationship is going to take power and that you in the mass work have a relationship to that process. And taking power means that we create a whole different kind of system. We go against this cynical philosophy of imperialism, of white power, and it is cynical. They say something wrong with you because you think about the group first. They actually say that. That one problem they say that black people have is because we think of the collective. They say you can't make it. They say the basis of actual success in society is individualism. You go for yourself, and when you're going for yourself, you forge new things and make stuff happen. And that's how white people get ahead. This is what they teach. But you, darky, you think of the group. You can't go nowhere because you want to take everybody with you. Yes, that's the society that we are talking about. And if you look at the world, the way it is today in reality, the majority of the peoples of the world have been left behind, left out, locked out, bled to death. And we can't see it because we see the world through the prism of imperialist white power. So we are a revolutionary party. Our objective is to tear it down and build something much better. In fact, we're building it in the process of tearing it down. That's what we call dual and contending power. When you support what we're doing, you are supporting the creation of the new world, even as we're fighting to destroy the old world. Ain't that something? You don't get that many, those kinds of opportunities too often. So we are a party that has a specific kind of philosophy. That's who we are. And I think that what's crucial is that the relationship of this philosophy to the acknowledgement that African people are one people scattered around the world, most time with false national unconsciousness. We'll say some more about that, but that's the reality. And you know how you know it's true? I did a debate at Oxford, England, and on the question of unity of African Union and stuff like that, and some of the people were saying, stood up and actually said that Africa cannot be united because it's so diverse and so big, and we got to come through. And so I didn't get a chance to talk back after he said that. This little crazy debate, you say something, somebody else say something, somebody else say something, but it's not like you can struggle with the person who just made a stupid remark. You can't say that's an asinine statement that you just made. You can't say that. Plus, it's not polite. You have to say, Mr. President, the person who just spoke in opposition to me made an asinine statement. You understand? So that's the rules of debate. Yeah. But how silly is that? The reality is that right now France controls 14 of what they call different countries. Now we're so diverse that we can't rule ourselves, but not too diverse that France can't rule 14 so-called countries. You understand what I'm saying? How stupid that is? France can control 14 different territories, but the Africans can't get along well enough because we're so diverse we can't control it ourselves. But the greatest example of how silly that is that here I am, and concentrated in me and in you, and especially outside of Africa, but not only outside of Africa, is all the Africans everywhere. Because I don't know what ethnic group I come from on the continent and don't want to know. I'm an African. I'm not concerned about my DNA say, plus that's a lie any damn way. All that stuff you get back is a lie. It is a lie. I mean, you get DNA back and they say, you from Nigeria. How the hell could I be from Nigeria when Nigeria didn't exist until 1915? You understand what I'm saying? Are you from Sierra Leone? Well, there's no such thing as Sierra Leone until, the last few years. How the hell could I be from Sierra Leone? Now, this is your invention, your creation. No, we are African people, and that's fundamental for us to understand, and we have to be unrelenting in saying that we're Africans, we're colonized here, we're colonized around the world. We are not affected by racism. We don't give a damn about what white people think about us. What we care is about what we think about ourselves, and what we think about ourselves is that we're Africans who have to be free from foreign domination, no matter whether they call themselves Americans, British, and the rest of that. And finally, what we recognize, and this is so critical, is that in the struggle for the liberation of the dispersed African nation, inside that struggle, there is a class struggle that is also raging. That's why we're dealing with right there in West Florissant. That's class struggle. All the people in North St. Louis are oppressed. All the black people are oppressed. But there are some black people who live among us who have an association with white power, who are tied to white power, economically dependent on white power to such an extent that they are no longer the people. They have left the people and they are part of the ruling class. Or they are sectors or appendages of the ruling class. They are a different class. And we are engaged in struggle with them every day, whether we are aware of it or not. We are in struggle with these characters, and they're going to have to unleash that, and unite with the people, or they will have to suffer the fate of the oppressor, and all of us have a responsibility to make that happen. So I just want to say, we promote African internationalism. That's what you're connected with in the mass work. You're connected with the Revolutionary Party. that has a strategy to liberate ourselves. You connect with an organization that is clear that the profound contradiction in the world revolved around colonialism, oppressor and oppressed nation, and you are part of an oppressor or oppressed nation, and what you do about that is the fundamental question that we're dealing with, and that this party gives us an opportunity to reconcile these relationships. So let's go out and build the mass organizations, do everything we can to make these organizations spread everywhere with this message, with this understanding that we just talked about now. Uhuru.
Uhuru. It was a great presentation. So what we're going to do now is watch a video from, you heard the chairman mention that he spoke at Oxford a few weeks ago, and we'll show the video from that, and then the chairman is going to help do the summation on that video. So do we have that lined up? Okay. I'm gonna move this back.
That the black man takes an uncompromising step and realizes that he's within his rights when his own freedom is being jeopardized to use any means necessary to bring about his freedom or put a halt to that injustice, I don't think he'll be by himself.
On December 4th, 2018, the Oxford Union invited Chairman Amalia Shatella to participate in the Oxford debates. The invitation read, "Dear Mr. Yeshatella, I hope this email finds you well. I am writing to extend an invitation to speak at the Oxford Union in our forthcoming term. Founded in 1823, the Oxford Union is the largest society at the University of Oxford and one of the most famous student societies in the world. In the past, we have hosted visits ranging from U.S. Presidents Reagan, Nixon, and Carter to Morgan Freeman and Malcolm X. Moreover, we are famous for debating the most important and pressing issues of the day, from a liberty and security debate last year to the King and Country debate of 1933. We would love for you to be a part of this tradition and speak on the motion, this House believes the left must reclaim populism. With a lifetime of fighting for freedom for African people, you are a globally inspiring champion for racial equality and socialism. Your vision has been crucial to shaping the theory of African internationalism and indeed the socialist movement worldwide. This timely debate would be hugely benefited by your irreplaceable perspective and input. The topic would later change to, should this House embrace an ever closer African Union? And the debate was themed, the Africa Debate.
It's because of young Africans right here in Ferguson who stood up.
Chairman Amalia Shatella accepted the invitation, bringing the theory of African internationalism to the world stage.
I cannot stand before this august body without prefacing my statement in defense of closer unity of Africa, without stating first my unconditional solidarity with President Maduro and the government and people of Venezuela who are currently under attack, savage attack by in the United States represent at least half of the largest prison population in the world. There are more Africans in prison in the United States than there are people in Djibouti or in Equatorial Guinea. And so we find it very difficult also recognizing that by their own estimates, it would take 228 years for the income of Africans colonized in the United States to equal that of the colonial white population. So it is absolutely necessary for me to stand here today before you expressing total opposition to the United States government terroristic actions against the people of Venezuela with an attempt to starve the people into opposition to their government. Mr. President, brothers and sisters, comrades, it is also necessary for us to say that this question of closer union with Africa, between Africans, or within Africa, is not a purely academic question, despite the fact that this debate has occurred within the pinnacle of bourgeois academia. That there is a natural, historical inclination for Africa and African people to be united, which is one of the reasons I am here today. The truth of the matter is that this discussion about the unity of Africa, union of Africans, started much earlier than any incursion, as it might be characterized, of China or the Trump administration into Africa. Reality is that Africa came under assault some 600 years ago when Portugal first came and captured African people and initiated a process that would begin capitalism and would establish and consolidate the identity of Europeans in the world. It is a reality that capitalism rests upon a foundation of African slavery. Africans were first capital. And in order for this to occur and to last, it was absolutely necessary to keep African people divided so that we could not resist this horrible incursion on Africa that continues up to now. I think it's important to be able to say that. I think that we have to say that we've seen example after example by African people to unite. We've seen what used to be warring tribes in this geographical terrain that we occupy at this moment, able to achieve a sense of sameness that people refer to as nations, founded on a common economy that came from slavery and colonialism. This is the basis of the unity that we seek. If there is a problem with the European Union today, it is because the foundation
informative, as usual, on point. Definitely Africa needs revolution.
Socialist International does exist, and we're building in what they call South Africa, and building in Kenya, and building in Ghana, and building, with Africans who are located in France and the United Kingdom and Germany and, Belgium and throughout the United States and, in the Caribbean. That is the actual occurrence of the revolutionary union that we're talking about, not this farce that came together after 1963, which was an attempt to block any kind of real union with Africa. We're talking about the union that Kwame Nkrumah talked about, but it can only occur through revolution. That means that the existing order has to be overthrown, destroyed, and the workers and the poor peasants have to come to power with their own revolutionary party. So we did what we could in 10 minutes. Yeah. What's that?
Actually, the debate was very inspiring in terms of history, in terms of culture, but also in terms of the challenges that are spreading the people of Africa across the Africa. I really enjoyed the quality of the debate and love the argument of the opposition and those who want an ever closer union. It was beautiful.
I think it was a wonderful presentation. I think that what I especially enjoyed was the emphasis on the necessity of socialism as well as African unity. So it cannot just be, a capitalist united system. It has to be socialist.
I was awestruck by the chairman's presentation, his argument and his address today. It wasn't an address that we commonly see at the union. It wasn't one that focused on the semantics or the nitty-gritties of the argument or the motion. It was one that called, outright for a revolution, and the argument behind that followed that. It was a revolutionary logic, which I'm glad he brought to the union. Yeah, change my views.
Uhuru, comrades, Uhuru brothers and sisters, I'm Loisi Kinshasa, the African Socialist International Secretary General. I would just like to talk quickly about the implication, the significance of historical Chairman O'Malley's stellar presentation at Oxford Union. So Chairman O'Malley's stellar presentation at the Oxford Union on the 24th of January was the voice of the African working class in alliance with the poor peasants and all honest forces opposed to the world's parasitic capitalist system against the white bourgeoisie and its ally of the African petty bourgeoisie. It was a war of ideas. That's what we saw. It was a recognition by the white ruling class that they have to contend with the rising philosophy of African internationalism. It was also the evidence that we all saw of the impossibility of the white bourgeoisie and the African petty bourgeoisie to win the philosophical battles against the African working class when it's equipped with the ideology of African internationalism. This is a new trend that we saw emerging in South Florida University a few years ago, where all the writings, all the books, all the work basically by Chairman O'Malley was assembled, collected, and stored in the South Florida University. And also, this is a new round of anti-colonial struggles. Unlike in the 50s, the 60s, and 70s, when the struggle was led by the African petty bourgeoisie, when it used to be dynamic and progressive, but today the struggle for national liberation is led by the African working class under the leadership of the African Socialist International. And that's really important for people to understand what we saw on that day at the Oxford Union. The African political bourgeoisie now is a reactionary social force. So it also was the struggle between the past and the future. And the future is basically a socialist revolution for a total liberation of Africa. It is an all African socialist governments, a unification basically of the African nation, all black people everywhere from around the planet being part of one nation, and Africa being the home. That's what we saw on that day, the leadership of the black working class for that historical mission. It was also the resurrection, the vindication of the unification project of the great Marcus Garvey and the late Kwame Nkrumah as the only answer to the daily national humiliation of black people everywhere by white imperialists and the new imperialists. What was also brilliant on that day, the chairman started his presentation by offering an unconditional solidarity to Maduro's Venezuela. And living here in the UK, you know, the government of the UK has refused to give back the gold of Venezuelan people that was given to UK to look after. Now they're asking for that gold to go back. They refused to do so. So it was important of that solidarity. It also was the right place for anyone who was there to begin basically to put an end to the media slander on Africa, giving the correct causes of our global suffering, and also on the causes of the crisis even here in the UK. To understand the Brexit causes, if you follow the presidential chairman, you will understand it. It was also a call to the African students who were in the room to commit class suicide. To commit class suicide, to join the future in joining the African Revolution, which means join the African Socialist International, which is the union of all African people's socialist parties across the planet. It was also a call to white youth, to white students who voted amongst African students, I guess, for a closer unity, to win the vote against loose unity. Basically, it was a call to them to rejoin humanity by committing national suicide and being in solidarity with Black Power. So we are winning. Join the future. Join the African Revolution. Join the African Socialist International.
That's a great slide. Yeah.
Well, I just think that this is one of the most important statements that you will find Marx would have made. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. And the problem is that most of the communists and Marxists that we've known have only interpreted the world and have never engaged in changing it. And that's exactly what we're about, changing the world. And so if you have an interpretation of the world that doesn't contribute to changing it, it's worthless. And no matter how brilliant it may seem, it's worthless. That's what we say that review of philosophy, if it can't be something that is actually made material in the real world, it's worthless. That's just what distinguishes African International, African People's Socialist Party.
Hey, U-H-U-R-U, free. U-H-U-R-U, free. Check out Marcus Garvey, check out John Henry Clark, check out Steve Biko. Don't be left in the dark. Hey, U-H-U-R-U, free. U-H-U-R-U, free. Check out Omali Yeshitela, Rap Brown, Malcolm X, Roman Sobukwe, Che Guevara, and Penny Hess. Africa, my beginning and my ending. About to show you what we are before European expansion. Look, man, I'm RPG, I don't front. I pick up the brick if I'm gonna yell that any puppet president run. White power and black face, got us filling up prisons. Call it SA or Azania, but a black government this isn't. To stick a black man, the pigs need no reason. Black sellouts sold their souls to neo-colonialism. Hence, we gotta try, hence, we gotta fight.
and we're going to have some discussion about the video. Uhuru.
Uhuru, I'd like to open it up. I think that Comrade Luizi Kinshasa, Secretary General Luizi, I think he did a good job beginning this process, but you had an opportunity to see it as well. It is notable that Malcolm X spoke there 55 years ago, and it was something that we were aware of even before we heard from Oxford. We thought everybody has been struck by the brilliance of Malcolm X. And I had seen that presentation, I had heard the presentation, seen it years ago by Malcolm. And, you know, just, it was so impressive to see Malcolm there doing what he did. I think it's important to say that Malcolm X was there at a really important time in history. What made it significant was, one, that a change was sweeping the movement of African people in this country and in the world. Malcolm X spoke there in 1964. The year before, the Organization of African Unity had been founded, had been created in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. 3 years before, Patrice Lumumba had been slaughtered, murdered, and butchered in the Congo. Struggle was happening everywhere in the world. 2 years after Malcolm spoke there, Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown. But at the same time, we see this process, the emergence of Jomo would be happening in 1960s. And then, of course, we saw the rise of the Black Panther Party, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee talking about Black Power. Something was changing. And what was happening was the liberals and the African petty bourgeoisie was losing control of this movement of African people that was happening around the world. The U.S. was trying to stop it with murdering Lumumba, overthrowing Nkrumah on the one hand. And in fact, just a few years before that, that was in after that, they killed Fred Hampton in Chicago. Something was sweeping the world. And Malcolm had been a member of the Nation of Islam. And we saw that the civil rights movement was losing steam, and something else was happening in the world. And then, of course, Malcolm was left the Nation of Islam, and he clearly was representing a whole new direction for the movement. Malcolm had been to Alabama, Mississippi, had spoken there, had spoken in Mississippi, had Fannie Lou Hamer speak in Harlem, New York, and things like that. He was this force that was emerging with a whole new direction, taken, in many ways, he was taken from the nationalism, black nationalism, which was really important, but he was wedding it to the actions that was associated with the civil rights movement, or some sectors of the civil rights movement. In fact, Malcolm, one of the things that pushed Malcolm out of the Nation of Islam was he talked about the criticism that he was running into all the time. He said, you Muslims talk a good talk, but all y'all do is talk, you know, where the struggle is out there. And Malcolm has tried to make the struggle. Some of you won't remember, most of you probably won't, but there was an instance when, remember Malcolm made a speech. He talked about the Muslims. He said that we're peaceful, we don't do anything but you put your hands on you, we'll send you to the cemetery. Remember that? Malcolm was very strict on that. But some Muslims have been attacked in Los Angeles. The police invaded and beat him up really badly. And the nation sent Malcolm X into Los Angeles. And they had to bring him out of there because Malcolm believed in, he believed what he was saying. And he was organizing and raising hell. He had everybody fired up in Los Angeles, so they brought him out of there. So Malcolm was changing everything. Malcolm is what made me had to look at one time at the Nation of Islam because of Malcolm X. So he obviously was something new, and he was unleashed now from the Nation of Islam that wasn't doing anything. and was talking about how to work with this new movement. And he was in the process of creating the Organization of Afro-American Unity that would be linked with African struggle in various places around on the continent of Africa. That was what he was involved in. So he spoke there in December 4th, I think it was. Was it December 4th or December 3rd? December 3rd, he spoke there. And the government killed him on February 21st. So they assassinated him there because something was happening. And the movement had run into this place, and now it was making another leap. And that was represented by Malcolm X. But even if they killed Malcolm, in many ways, it was just too late, because he had actually seeded, he had actually created the ideological and political basis for a real development of our movement, not just in the United States, by the way, but worldwide. So I just wanted to say that I thought that that was what was key about Malcolm being there. And I feel like also one of the things that our movement has been struggling for a long time, certainly parties have been involved in this, is that masses of people don't have a grip on what it is we're fighting for. At one time, people said we're fighting for civil rights, or we're fighting for black power, et cetera. But with the defeat of the revolution and the ascension of the African petty bourgeoisie and the whole counterinsurgency program, there's no, what are we fighting for anymore? I mean, we free, people talk about black history like something that happened a while ago, and when they, it's not connected to anything that's going on now. So that's been a real difficult thing. And it was really interesting about the letter that we got from Oxford, because the letter acknowledged African internationalism and the fact that we've been developing the theory of African internationalism and the implications it has for Africa, and then the whole implication it has for the development of socialism as a whole. That's what that letter mentioned. So I thought that whoever wrote that letter was aware of the significance of the rise of African internationalism today, just as Malcolm was recognized as being significant at the time when they brought him to Oxford. And that something was afoot, that something was happening, and I think that's what Oxford was, they recognized that as well. The other people who we spoke, who were on that panel, it was an interesting motley crew. I hate using that term now because I know it's associated with some kind of hippie thing, but it was something that people talked about much earlier. This motley crew of forces, that one of whom, who was supposed to be on the same side I was on, was African who came from the United States, who was formerly the U.S. ambassador to the Organization of African Unity, who was a permanent representative of something at the United Nations. Another person was the former, who was opposed to it, was the former Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, who had, he was the leader now of the Movement for Democratic Change in Zimbabwe, which was an organization that was created by the white settlers there to undermine and contend with Mugabe and the Zimbabwe African National Union when they took the land from the white farmers, and then the white people created this organization called Movement for Democratic Change. So he was on the opposing view, one of the persons. One person couldn't get there, and this was almost hilarious, and this guy was the former Prime Minister of Guinea. And they wouldn't let him in the country because he didn't have a visa. That blows my mind, because this guy's a former prime minister, and they wouldn't let him in the country, when an ordinary white person, it's literally true, an ordinary white person can go to almost any African country, visa or not. You can just go there and say, I don't have a visa, and most white people can get into Africa like that. But this guy was the former prime minister, had been invited by Oxford to speak there, and they wouldn't let him in the country. Another person who was supposed to speak was a person who was in the parliament in Uganda and had worked in the office of the president of Uganda. I don't know why she didn't make it. I mean, I'm just mentioning these persons as some of the people that we were debating. And 2 or 3 of the people were Oxford graduates themselves, you know. So anyway, I felt like it was an important thing to do. We debated it for a while we didn't debate going because we assumed we were going to go. I was surprised when I opened up my email and saw this invitation. I thought it might have been, you know, how you get stuff on email, you know, and, you know, so I thought it might have been some kind of sham thing. And, but they did invite me there. So it was important, we felt, to do it because, as we said, it's the pinnacle of bourgeois academia. Oxford is probably the most renowned university in Europe, you know, and so for them to have me there, I thought it gave us an opportunity to put African internationalism on the map and to do it in academia, which is going to be really important for a number of reasons. So I'll stop now and ask people to participate. And also, I know that we had heard from comrades at Tafari, and I know that people in South Africa and some other places in Kenya, they had thought it was an important thing to do. I don't know if any of them are still online, but if so, I would like for them to. Tafari and Louise is on. Okay, so how would they participate, by chat or something like that? So I want to open it up in general and for them as well. So any observations, and also for anybody else who's online? Uhuru. Yeah, please. Yeah. But it was really something to be the African working class in that midst, and I was quite conscious of it. You know, we took the class up in there, and we broke. You know, they talked about how it was supposed to be a black tie thing, and you know, there was some agonizing debate over whether we were going to wear a tuxedo and a black tie like what they were asking for. But I think the working class went there to that meeting and did things a bit differently.
I just got a question on the definition of a reactionary force.
Reactionary?
Yeah.
Reactionary is forces, that's a force who tries to take things back to the past. I know some people use reactionary and they say, but most time they move incorrectly. They think that a reactionary is somebody who's just responding to something, is that you're reacting to something. But politically, what it has meant, it is distinguished from like a conservative who tries to maintain the status quo more or less. And a reactionary is somebody who wants to actually go backwards in time, take stuff backwards. So that's what we mean when we talk about reactionary. Thank you for that question. I think it's really important. Uhuru, yeah.
I got another question. Surely. In regards to the overview, and speaking about whether science is falsifiable,
yeah.
You went into Europeans leaving Europe, going to Africa, creating a whole new economic system. And if that's true, you can take it down. I was trying to get some clarification around that process of, you know, overturning the social system.
Well, first, what I meant by falsifying and I raised that as clearly something that is concrete, that's provable. And if you can remove that reality, for example, in one thing that I wrote, perhaps it was in the political report to the 6th Congress, said something to the effect that would capitalism exist if there had been no slavery in Africa, if there had been all these attendant things, had they not occurred, would there be capitalism? And my response is no. And so that's falsifiable. When you say, you can say this is the reality, but some people would say, like, for example, if somebody said that in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God, and they require you to believe that, but it's not falsifiable. There's no way you can falsify that kind of stuff. I mean, okay, in the beginning the Word was God, okay, you presuppose the absence of lips and you know, everything that goes along with being the word, right? So that's not something that can falsify. But we can falsify this by saying that if these factors did not exist, then the reality that you suggest could not be here as well. But you can't say that, you know, and that's what religious and other unscientific theory of philosophy will do. It's not falsifiable. And sometimes they can be militant, but it's not falsifiable. There's no way that you can do it. And I think that's also attached to the assumption that, philosophers only explain the world, you know, in various ways, but the point is to change it. But that doesn't tell you anything that gives you the ability to change the world at all. So that's part of what I meant. And then you said something about, what else did you attach to that?
It was the example you had given about how the social system, capitalism, came into being. And then you were going into how.
So if you know how it came into being, you know why it can. If it's a system that rests upon the slavery and colonialism, you destroy it by getting rid of slavery and colonialism. Yeah, that's what we're saying. It's falsifiable, and that's what informs us. It's a scientific theory that we're working with. Uh-huh.
I just wanted to say that also Bertin in Paris.
I'm sorry.
I said I don't have a question. I was just wanting to say that Bertin in Paris is also.
Oh, Dudi is on in Paris is on. Good. Uhuru. Yeah. Uhuru, come in.
Yeah. All right. My name is T'Chara Masimba. I'm out of St. Louis, Missouri. So I want to go back to this question of mass organization.
Yeah. And
I wanted to ask if how do you see the Black Panther Party, you know, as having functioned as a party organization in the 60s? And, you know, I know they call themselves a party, but did they really function as a party in terms of how they went about mass organization? You know, whether because they obviously made some mistakes, you know.
Yeah, they made some mistakes, but I think the Panthers were really important, and they established a template that we can use to measure what it is that we do. But I think we can legitimately call the Black Panther Party a revolutionary party. It was a party. It was a party, though it was eclectic in terms of its philosophy. You look at the Black Panther Party, on the one hand, they were Maoists, and then they were anarchists. There was Eldridge in particular. He used to, you know, really promote, what's this guy out of Russia? Well, most of the important anarchists came out of Russia, but this is one of the Kropotkin. Yeah, you know, they were holding up them. Kim Il-sung and Juche, that's what you would see coming out of the Black Panther Party. So they were eclectic as hell. But yeah, I would consider them a revolutionary party. Yeah, okay. A party, yeah.
And I had another question. You know, when you look at revolutionaries like Mao, Lenin, and Nkrumah, they dealt with this question of how social systems come into existence, and you know, whether you can go straight to socialism, or whether you got to go through capitalism, or whether you got to, you know, Nkrumah talked about nationalism and you know, nationalists, and how they function in this process of transitioning to socialism. So I wanted to see, you know, how you see that, and particularly, you know, when we look at Black nationalism in this country, you know, this Black capitalist kind of line, and this African petty bourgeoisie that we see, I think, really trying to fight to emerge now.
I want to say
how we contend with it. That's the question.
A couple of things. I think Mao was an incredibly important, incredibly significant historical force. And it's really difficult in a short period of time to sum up a lot of the struggles that Mao had to contend with. But one of the things that made Mao so important was he broke from, as quiet as he's kept, even though he talked about Marx and Marxism and stuff like that, he broke from the Marxist mode that presupposes that this primary struggle had to exist between the working class and the industrial bourgeoisie. And he said that the primary social force that had to be organized was the peasantry. And he made the primary contradiction, as he characterized it, between the cities and the countryside. And this was something that was translated to be a global movement, with the imperialist centers representing the cities and the oppressed peoples around the world occupying the countryside. And that the victory comes as a consequence of cutting off the resources coming to the cities. That's the strategic movement that, that would be considered part of, what Mao would have done. And I thought he made fundamental contributions. And he was also significant because Mao broke from the whole white thing, because everybody viewed the revolutionary thing through white lenses, and then when the Chinese made that incredible revolution, and it would be hard to talk about, to really overstate the significance of the revolutionary movement, and even the difference in what China had to go through to achieve revolutionary victory as opposed to the Bolsheviks in Russia. So he was profoundly significant, and I think he made some major contributions philosophically. He wrote some great stuff. You have to cleanse it a lot from some of the Marxist characterizations and stuff like that, but that's what Mao had to deal with. He had to deal with the influence of Stalin at the time, the hope and requirement, the attempts to, have resources and support from the Soviet Union, and even before then, when Mao was fighting for the leadership inside the Chinese Communist Party, they all had to pay homage to Marx, because that was the, leading, theoretical, outlook for oppressed peoples everywhere. But Mao, I think, was critically successful. And Nkrumah was different in the sense that Nkrumah did not even acknowledge class and class struggle until after he was overthrown. What we really appreciate about Nkrumah more than anything is his recognition of the need for African unity, his recognition and definition of neo-colonialism. He did that, but because he did not identify and recognize class, at the time, he did not give neo-colonialism a class character. You see, and the party did that, gave neo-colonialism a class character. I want to say that we are engaged in a struggle for national liberation. This is what has confused a lot of people that would have them say, the class thing doesn't mean anything, we're all niggers, we're all black people, and the white man is against all of us. And to some extent, the white man is against all of us. That's what colonialism is. It contains, it dominates, it extracts value, oppresses a whole nation of people. So we don't deny that. What we do deny is that there is no such thing as class stratification that has been imposed in the African community. So you can be a nationalist and want to overturn the relationship that you have with empire. It doesn't mean that you want to transform the society that you're living in so that it's a different kind of society. You have, among the nationally oppressed people, you have what we call people who are united, we call it with liberal imperialism. You see, that's the difference, say, like in, what's this guy's name out of Ramaphosa. You can say, what's the other guy's name before him? No, I'm sorry, but Mandela, connected to liberal imperialism, right? Then you have what we call a petty bourgeois sector that's patriotic. That is to say, they believe blackness, black power, and all of this, but when they say blackness and black power, it's that they're in a contest with imperialism for control of the resources, but they want to replace imperialism with their own social class. They're not talking about overturning and transforming the society so that the working class who produce all the value now collectively own and control all the value. No, they're saying getting the white man out, so that we can do this. They say get the white man out the community, get them stores out so we can put up some black stores, but it doesn't say buy black power. It doesn't say anything that's going to transform the African community. So nationalists are able, and we can unite with nationalists to get rid of the oppressor, to get rid of the colonizer, to get rid of the imperialist forces. We can unite with them to that extent. But we are poised to take the struggle beyond that. That's why we've used the analogy of getting a rocket, right? To get a rocket out of this atmosphere. You got a big rocket, you want to get out the atmosphere, but it can't make it on its own. So they connect these things that they call what? Boosters. Booster rockets. They attach booster rockets to it to help it get out of the atmosphere. When they get out of the atmosphere, the booster rockets fall off, and then the big rocket goes where you need to go. We the big rocket. And that means that they're attached, we have attached to us some time. We attach ourselves, allow these booster rockets to attach themselves, and mostly those are nationalists who do oppose white power domination, but they don't want the working class to come to power. And sometimes you hear them and we work with them and you see what they write about how the white man doing this, that, but they don't say the working class has to come to power. They don't say that, sometimes they don't even say the system has to be overturned, et cetera. Yeah, I don't know if I addressed it at all. Okay, Uhuru. I saw you, Kabula. Uhuru.
Uhuru, this is from Tafari. He says, Uhuru, chairman and comrades.
This is Tafari. He's the chair of the African People's Socialist Party in South Africa. Uhuru.
He said, on the Oxford debate, I think everyone didn't understand the debate question the same way. Otherwise, we are the only people there who explained how that union is going to happen. We talked about changing the world. We have to use that video more. That's what we're going to do here in South Africa. And then he asked, I want to ask about impedum. Can we reject anyone from joining, say they are reactionary? That was his question.
Can we reject anyone?
From joining, like impedum.
Yeah, we can reject anybody from joining impedum. Yeah. Yeah, just the Constitution informs of what it takes to be a member of NPDUM. If they meet those requirements, and of course, I don't think there's anything that compels us to bring somebody in, but anybody can join if they meet those requirements. It would probably been helpful if we'd known exactly what the debate is, but yes, just generally speaking, anybody can join if they meet the requirements of the Constitution. Uhuru. Yes, comrade.
Uhuru, I just really want to salute that video, and also to...
we salute the comrades, Director Akile, and I think Kyle, and David, and all those people who pulled that together.
It really, it's so powerful, and just to say, it was a profound honor to have been able to accompany on that trip along with Janice Camp from APSP and Mark Anderson from Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So there was a solidarity contingent, and it was very, very powerful to be there and to see history in the making, and to see, first of all, you electrified that room, which means the African working class electrified the room and defeated everything that imperialism had, because that university is supposed to be the top university in the world, and it prepares people, white people, to be able to govern and administer the colonial powers.
And it prepares the petty bourgeoisie, the colonized petty bourgeoisie.
Yes, as well. And I just wanted to say a couple of things about it. That first of all, you debated, there were 3 different debaters on each side, and the position of the House, as they say, was that Africa should have a closer union. There were 2 other people that, quote, debated that, and 3 people who debated that Africa should not have a closer union. And, but the chairman introduced, as one person says there, the revolutionary logic, which was the first time that's ever been done, and defeated and fought all of them because nobody had the position that you had. And I think that one of the things that you could see is, first of all, that half the people were sleeping during the other ones. It was just so dull and meaningless, and everybody was just electrified when the chairman spoke. And I know that you could hear the applause was going on and on and on. People were standing up, and it was it was just nothing. And as you said, this is not about academia, or somehow you acknowledge that this is real life. This is the conditions that African people face. I thought it was really powerful that you acknowledge Venezuela, because that brought it right to now. That brought it out of academia into, into real life right there, and just set the terms for everything else that you were going to say. And I just wanted to say, okay, so this, before that debate, which started at about 8:30, there are other debates of students before that. And these students, you're watching this, and these students are like reading it, I mean, they have nothing to say. They're so bad that anybody in this room also, geared with African internationalism, like the chairman said, can kick their asses. Like, this is the greatest university in the world, and you could, go to a high school and you could hear a debating team, anywhere, and it would be better, it would be more lively than this was. And so, just for people to be able to hear the truth of African internationalism, how that pierces through all of the lies of imperialism's, worldview. It was electrifying to see, and to see the chairman bring the African Revolution, in such a powerful way and kick their asses. And also to say that, just to see the difference in the 55 years, even though some of the issues like Congo and all of these things that Malcolm X raised were still, roiling today, but to see the depth of African internationalism and the depth that gave you versus Malcolm X in that period, to see, how the ideas and philosophy, as you're saying, of the African working class and African Revolution has been, consolidated into African internationalism, and just brought all the problems solved by the party, and brought so much clarity that, it indicted colonialism, and it challenged all the white people there, but it also gave everybody there the ability to stand on the forward side of history. So it was historic. It was really powerful. I just really want to salute you. It was just so brilliant. So,
thank you.
Uhuru, Chairman. I too just want to piggyback off what Penny has said and salute that presentation and appreciate it. You taking the African working class into Oxford, and you just spoke about this being the pinnacle of bourgeois academia, and these people are being prepared to govern. And the political report speaks to African internationalism preparing the African working class to govern. So, you said any one of us could go in that room and do that. So, it's truly preparing us to govern as an African working class. And yesterday you talked a lot about dialectics and, imperialism dying. And you opened up the debate with the statement of solidarity with Venezuela. So I'm wondering, does the current situation in Venezuela, as well as having been invited to Oxford, sort of signify a rising socialism or socialist consciousness amongst the masses, in your opinion?
Well, I think that when Malcolm went there in '64, the British and the United Nations, they had just been murdering African people in Congo, and Malcolm addressed that. And I thought that was really important. And what's really important here was the consistency of imperialism and how it works. But in terms of aggressing against all the people around the world. And then what we did was, we said Malcolm was killed 2 months after he left there, and we went back and said Malcolm lives, and that this is the consistency of the African Revolution. When we talk about Venezuela, that was what we were saying, the African Revolution lives. And not only did we say the African Revolution lives, I want to say that, when Malcolm was there, it was an entirely different period, and Malcolm brilliantly, defended this whole question. The theme, the discussion that Malcolm spoke to was whether or not you know, extremism versus moderation or something like that. And that was something that came from the U.S. presidential race between Goldwater and Lyndon Baines Johnson, who won the Democratic nomination. And Goldwater sort of blew it with this brilliant thing about, he said, because he was characterized as an extremist. That's how the Johnson administration, the Democrats, had put this tag on him that he was this extremist. And he says something like, this extremism in defense of liberty is no whatever problem, and moderation in the defense, in the face of whatever is not good. And so that's how they came up with that, and Malcolm was addressing that. And it was also part of an ongoing crisis. Imperialism has been in a state of crisis for a while now, and Congo was part of it. When Lumumba threw down, was it the king of, what was it in Belgium? This guy in Belgium, was it a king? Or when Lumumba did that, I mean, it wasn't just that Lumumba won the election, which was critical because they had set it up for somebody else to win. But when Lumumba then stood up in the face of this guy talking about how much the Belgians had done for Congo, and Lumumba wasn't even supposed to speak, and he's scribbling madly while this guy's standing. He jumped up and said what Congo had done to our people, and how, Congo didn't give us anything. It's blood, and struggle that, won this independence, et cetera. So this is part of the whole crisis. They've been trying to shut us up for a while now. And to stop the emergence of this revolutionary trajectory, this crisis has been something that's been going on for a while. And I think that, when we went there, Malcolm did not have the depth of the analysis that we took. Malcolm did not condemn imperialism as such. He did not say that the whole thing rests upon the oppression and exploitation of African people. He was not able to do that at that time. So we took it beyond where Malcolm was able to take it at that time. And the other thing that we did was we quite consciously, we had some debate about this question of the tuxedo and the black tie stuff, D.C. Owner likes to credit herself with my decision not to wear the tuxedo. But this was something I was debating all down the line, and I'm looking for what I could wear other than that. And there was, the outfit I wanted to wear was in St. Louis, in the closet there. And and D.C. was saying, well, have somebody bring it when they come. And I said, well, that's not going to help because I got to get it to the dry cleaners and everything. So I ended up wearing the outfit that you saw me wearing. And how's that? Good selection? Yeah. And as you saw, when we took the picture, you see how everybody sits on those pictures, you understand? And, they had Malcolm like that too. I already knew that wasn't going to happen, right? So I did a whole different thing for them. And, it was the African working class. And I think that one of the things that makes what happened in Oxford significant, hopefully, is that it gives confidence to the African working class, that you don't have to be cowed and anything by these guys, you understand? And the other thing that I did that went over, you would not have paid that much attention to it because your introduction to revolutionary politics already brought this to you, but Garvey. See, Garvey has been a disgraced figure. The African petty bourgeoisie has attacked Garvey, Du Bois, and today, the Negro intellectuals, they attack Garvey. They don't like Garvey, you know what I'm saying? So to bring Garvey there and then to say Marcus Garvey did this, that was really, really, really important for us to do in that setting as well. Because England hounded Garvey, and he died in England. So I thought that was really important. And the debate, I say we won the debate 2-1. Yeah. I mean, and the votes that came down, it was a 2-1 victory in that debate. And of course, we debated everybody in the room, and we debated Oxford and, as well, and came out a 2-to-1 victory. And so I thought that was important as well.
Uhuru.
Yeah.
This is from Comrade Yejide in DC. It's in reference to Charles' question that he asked earlier. She asked, how could Black Panther Party be a party with differing philosophies? This is not characteristic of other revolutionary parties. Please explain.
It has been characteristic of other parties, of some other parties. You know, the philosophy, when I said it was eclectic, it didn't mean it had an eclectic philosophy. That's what it meant. It meant that they borrowed a little of this and a little of that, and so you could read, you know, that little red book, Mao. I mean, and then you would see them quoting Juche, depending on what leader was writing or talking about it. So, you know, it was eclectic. It was not philosophically consistent, but it was a party. And if only it represented itself in what I think was, you know, people appreciate this program, but it really is a kind of 10-point mass program is really what it was. It's sort of like a democratic program as such, but that is what informed it as well. So it was not consistently, it didn't have a consistent worldview, except revolution it talked about. It did believe in capturing political power for a long period of time. And then you got to remember that later on, Huey did come up with his own philosophical intervention with this philosophy of intercommunalism, which was an interesting gambit that he raised, and through his philosophy, the intercommunalism, which was something that actually liquidated the existence of nations and said now that you just have these interconnected communities and nations didn't exist anymore. So it was philosophy. We might not like it and agree with it, and it was eclectic as hell, but it was a philosophy, and it held the organization together and propelled it to the heights that it was able to achieve for a short duration of its existence. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say for everybody one other thing about going to Karl Marx's grave, because in London there's this cemetery, Highgate Cemetery, which is where Karl Marx's grave is, and that video doesn't show the head of him, which it would be good if that could be added, but this is a huge gravestone, I guess you would say. And it has Karl Marx, his daughter, his wife, you know, a lot of his family is in there as well. And it's interesting that it is a major tourist destination, and people come, there's crowds when you go there. That was the second time that I had been able to go there. And there huge crowds go there. They leave flowers, they have red candles all around. And I just think it's interesting in the time when they say that communism is defeated around the world, that there are people from around the world that come there to Karl Marx's grave. But when the chairman came, and it was with other members of the party, mostly, and the chairman had on his Russian cap, as you saw in there,
Soviet,
the Cossack, or the Soviet cap,
yeah.
and you know, all these insignias of revolutionary, and everybody was coming up to the chairman saying, "Can we take our picture with you?" It was, you know, it was really clear. I mean, it just caused a great stir in it with all the other people that were looking, and they were taking pictures of you, et cetera. And I just thought that that was so, you know, just so symbolic of the fact that you had brought Karl Marx into the 21st century by exposing his contradictions and keeping the African Revolution alive. But that was very interesting as well.
What was that Russian word for hat, Janice?
It was French.
It was French word? Oh, okay. Yeah, French word. Yeah, there's a hat with the Soviet symbol on it, you know. Huh? Ushanga? Spell it as a U or B? U, Ushaka, yeah. Okay. So, anyway, I thought that Oxford was really important, and it should really enhance the confidence of everybody You know, we coming from a period where, you know, movements don't even have identities anymore. There's no philosophical foundation, grounding, and what have you. None of the people who are contending with us in the militant Black liberation movement, I couldn't come up with another term, even you know, call themselves having philosophy. They call themselves leftists or something like that. And we never use the term leftist. We seldom use the term leftist and never use it to describe ourselves, because to me, leftists suggest a sort of loyal opposition. You know, I mean, the concept of leftism, it's from French Parliament. And I think the so-called progressives or something was always on the left side of the parliament and the others on the right side. And this is where the term leftism and leftist come from. But we never considered ourselves that. We are not, and it also makes an assumption again that you're part of the system that you're struggling with. We're not some left in this system. We are colonized. We want to overturn the left and the right. You understand? I mean, all of them, all of it has to go. So there's, you know, left colonialists and right colonialists have to go. That's why we're not fazed with this whole concept of fascism. What's the difference in a fascist colonizer and a democratic colonizer? The fascists, you know, the French fought against fascism. The Americans fought against fascism. And yet the French, you know, brutalized and kept Africa colonized, and fought the Vietnamese in a very serious war to keep them communist. So these are anti-fascists. These are left fascists, left colonizers, as opposed to fascist colonizers. So our contradiction is to deal with colonialism. And it doesn't matter to us if it's a left colonizer or a right colonizer, you know. Anyway, thank you, comrades. Uhuru.
Yeah, I really want to appreciate the that video and the chairman's comments and responses to the questions. We're going to take a break until 12 o'clock, and at 12 o'clock, we're going to promptly get started with the Recruitment for Mass Organizations workshop, and that's going to be done by Chiwaniso and Connor. So be back in your chairs at 12 o'clock and be ready for that workshop. So we're going to take a break, and then we'll ask them to help us try to catch up with some of the time. So take a short break, and then we'll be back at 12 o'clock. for the mass organizations. So I want to call up Connor and Chiwaniso. Uhuru.
Uhuru. My name is Chiwaniso, and I'm the International Secretary for IMPEDUM. And like Chimaranga said, our presentation is going to be on recruitment for mass organizations. This workshop is designed to provide new and veteran members with the tools to recruit and develop the people we meet and work with. We cannot go through everything involved in recruitment, but we will give a broad overview of different recruiter strategies, so please take notes. Productivity is the deliberate, strategic investment of your time, talent, intelligence, energy, resources, and opportunities in a manner calculated to move measurably closer to meaningful goals. Outreach should be productive. One way that we measure the productivity in outreach is in our effectiveness of reaching organizing goals. One of the most important aspects of outreach and recruitment is to keep organizational goals in front of you. This workshop will train each member on how to reach organizational goals for recruitment and membership using the scientific processes that are developed in our manuals. The process of outreach cannot be seen in a static way. We must see outreach as an ever-evolving means by which we recruit and transmit the ideas of the party. We have to see it as an ever-evolving means by which we transmit the ideas of African internationalism. Our objective is to effectively disseminate the ideology of self-determination and the struggle against the counterinsurgency war against African people and for reparations to the African world. The objectives of the mass organizations are to educate and organize African masses to establish ourselves as a powerful political force ready to engage on an ever political front. Every political engagement empowers the people to fight the next battle. Why is outreach so important? Outreach is a key front of the movement's Organization for the Liberation of African People, under the leadership of African People's Socialist Party. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela has stated, the basic job of a mass organization is to communicate African internationalism to the masses. Outreach establishes you and your organization as a professional political presence in the community you are operating in. Regular tables, spear rallies, etc. give the masses a regular place where they know they can find the organization. Outreach is also the most thrilling, fun, and exciting activity you can do. It is the best political education imaginable because you are out there in the world interacting with the masses, answering hard questions, and finding new ways to articulate the line that feels natural to you and that resonates with others. It's also one of our most important fundraising tools, and it is a way that we build contact databases and get the word out about upcoming events and distribute the spear. Mobilization and organization. We must mobilize the people through issues into organization. Mobilization, however, is temporary. Organization is permanent. Examples of this are mobilizing the people at a march or a rally around the issue of housing with the end goal of organizing a community housing board versus simply having a march to protest unfair housing. And here are some tips for mobilization and organization. Some of the tips are having revolutionary confidence, be genuine, be yourself, use creativity, assume unity of the people, be consistent and persistent, be bold, be upstanding, recognize your forces and salute them, build the strengths, don't dwell on weaknesses, and cherish the people because they literally are everything. At best, win, and at least neutralize, meaning prevent them from becoming an enemy. Take the long view and don't give up. Revolutionary patience with urgency is required. Treat each individual contact as a doorway into the whole community. Organize regular people. Study the theory and history of the Uhuru movement. Defend the party no matter what. Get people involved in the work as quickly as possible after meeting them, and have roles in mind for people. Who are we trying to reach? There are two different kinds of outreach that you can conduct, or two different types of recruitment. One is a general strategy where you're trying to reach normal everyday people, friends and family. And we also have targeted outreach or recruitment where you're trying to reach sectors that have a unique stake in the African Revolution, such as women, men, LGBTQ, students, artists, elders, and religious groups. When and where should you do outreach? Outreach should be done regularly on a weekly basis to give a professional presence in the community. You're supposed to do outreach when your local body is available to try to get the most people involved, and also be sensitive to the weather. Places where people are not rushing to work or engagements are good places to do outreach. And some examples can be farmers markets, grocery stores, coffee shops, trains or bus stations, festivals, music festivals, etc. No matter the outreach, you should always have with you a sign-up sheet. Along with the sign-up sheet, I usually bring a notepad to outreach because outreach is a report from the party, from the people to the party. And I like to take notes on important issues such as people that they mention, places that they mention, and just things in general that the people might say to you. I also sometimes just take general notes on how the outreach actually went in a particular area so that when you provide reports to leadership, you can have a fresh idea of what happened in that area for future outreach plans. On the outreach sign-up sheet should have the organization name and logo. It should have the name, phone, email address, and interests, and social media name of the person who's signing up. The outreach sheet should be very clean. It should be a crisp, new sheet of paper. It shouldn't be old, wrinkly. It shouldn't have stains on it. Make sure that all of the writing on the outreach sheet is legible before you turn it in. Treasure the outreach sheets because they are a resource, and turn them in after every outreach or as directed. Oh, and I'm sorry, also on the outreach sheet should be a date. How should outreach be conducted? Again, outreach is a report from the people to the party. And we use outreach to mobilize the masses around issues that lead them into organization. Different types of outreach can be postering. And with postering, there's a sample checklist of what you might include for postering, and some of those items are posters, walk-up sheets or map, pins, goals, and summation form. Also, we have phone banking, and some things that you might use for phone banking would be, of course, your phone, script, a target list, notepad, pens, and always the goals and summation form. Another type of outreach is roving outreach. And with roving outreach, you might bring burning spears. Well, you would definitely bring burning spears. Your pens, your square card reader for people who would like to purchase the spear. Start change in an envelope, a bank bag for all of the resources that you collect. Your clipboard, your contact sheet, the flyer for your next local meeting or event, and a piece that shows party programs, such as the Black Power Blueprint pamphlet or membership brochures. And you also, again, have your goals and summation form. For outreach, you should uphold an outreach dress code. You should either wear a shirt from your organization or a blank t-shirt with no writing. And it's also good to coordinate with your comrades so that you're all wearing the same shirt. And it adds a flair of professionalism to each outreach. Another form of outreach is tabling. And the objective of the tabling method is the outreach to build a contact base. And it's also for recruitment of new members. This method of outreach does not emphasize speed or quantity as an objective. It is a tool to initiate discussion with individuals or groups of individuals in a controlled setting. And it can be organized indoors or at events outdoors, also at meetings, conferences, things like that. The method is very effective outside of grocery stores, community centers, churches, and shopping centers. The organizer involved in the tabling process, however, has to be aggressive. We should not expect people to just come to the table voluntarily without our asking them to come. And we should have flyers, petitions, brochures, position papers on issues in the African community as the entry point to our discussion. We should also, of course, have our pens, index cards, our clipboard, a donation jar, or a can with the top, and have confidence in your politics as your main tool for the successful implementation of outreach. And we have to be security conscious, especially when there are resources at the table. And again, this is just a list of some of the things you would bring, and some of them I went over on the checklist. And again, with tabling, you should also uphold the same type of dress code where you're wearing a plain black shirt with the movement button or some type of a Uhuru Movement t-shirt. A daily task for all members of the Uhuru Movement is to sell the spear, as it is defined as the most powerful organizing tool in the arsenal of an African internationalism. Tips for selling the spear include setting measurable goals, such as 5 per person per hour. Make sure to read the paper in advance and choose an article that speaks to you and show that article to your contacts. Also sell spears at all events and carry it with you at all times. And actually, speaking to the Burning Spears recruitment tool, the Burning Spear is actually the recruitment tool that brought me into the party. So it just really shows the significance of having the Burning Spear with you at all times, because you never know what's in it that can resonate with the audience that you're trying to recruit. Also, we have 4 corners in soapboxing. The 4 corners outreach method has 3 main objectives for its use. The first objective is quantity, the second is speed, and the third is visibility. Weaknesses associated with 4 corners are the people who receive the flyer could be from any part of town. Therefore, it might limit their understanding about a specific subject or about that location. Also, this type of outreach limits the ability of the distributor to explain the contents on the flyer when you're at busy intersections. In addition, there is limited feedback from the people that you receive when they get the material because the cars could possibly be moving quickly. In addition, with 4 corners, some tools that you might use are pre-counted flyers in stacks of 100, distributors, at least 4, banner holders, at least 2. Everyone should be on time and prepared to work. Bring hats, sunglasses, things that are appropriate for the weather. Index cards and pens for each distributor in case contacts are made. Outreach logs, cell phones for participants, and for emergency contact numbers for those who are participating in outreach. In the event that we had to call one of their loved ones, we want to have a cell phone. Bullhorn, t-shirts with the organizational name or logo, and water during hot weather. A good 4 corners outreach session will be at a busy 4-way section. 1 distributor will be at each corner. A banner will be held by the forces facing the direction for maximum visibility. 1 organizer will use the bullhorn to put out the line and encourage them to take the propaganda. And this will probably mean the banner is held at an angle that will help from a triangle. So if we're on a corner, we would hold it at a triangle, like the line, and like that. So, and this helps with the visibility, holding it at a 90-degree angle. Another type of outreach is drops, and this method of outreach has at least 2 very specific objectives when it's carried out properly. The first objective is distributing the maximum amount of material. It is a method to distribute thousands of pieces of literature that can affect public opinion. However, consolidating people into organization who may be influenced by this outreach is limited. And the second objective of drops is speed. When these objectives work in combination effectively, the result is a maximum amount of propaganda distributed in the shortest amount of time possible. To produce this result in time, we employ certain tested methods that have proved effective in many places where we do work. First, the preparation for the drop is to organize the maximum number of people to participate, and this can be done through meetings or phone banking. We should also combine the 2 recruiting methods to get maximum participation. The second aspect of the drop is having the drop material prepared when you already arrive. So like we discussed, having pre-counted stacks of 100. So whenever you do drops, the material should already be prepared in stacks just to distribute to whoever's going to be passing out the material. And this double, and also, I'm sorry, at the end of the event, when you're finished doing the drops, when people turn them in, they should also give a count of how many flyers they have left. And this is a double count, which acts as a way that we can ensure how many flyers we actually turned out to give an accurate count on our outreach reports. A relative reasonable assessment of how much material should be distributed on a given day A relative reasonable assessment of how much material should be distributed on a given day can be figured out by multiplying the number of people participating in the drop by 75, and that's the number of potential flyers that we can distribute in 1 hour. And then you take that number and you multiply it by the number of hours that you would do the outreach. So the number of people by 75 by the number of hours you do outreach, and that will give you the number of how many flyers you should be able to distribute. And under here we have an example. So say for instance we had 6 people participating in the drop, and they're going to stay for 4 hours. We would do 6 by 4 by 75, and that would get you 1,200 flyers. Another type of outreach is door-to-door. The door-to-door method of outreach is primarily used to consolidate areas that are previously saturated with drops. So after you do a drop in an area, it's always good to go back into those same areas because like we stated before, drops are not a good time to be able to talk to people because it's about speed. So when you do drops, you go back to the same area to then conduct your door-to-door where you have more time to speak to the people. Security has to be a primary concern when doing this type of outreach. Do not enter houses that you go to. The residents should be asked to step outside or talk to them through the screen. Women organizers have to be especially mindful of the security issues while carrying out door-to-door organizing, and organizers are not to enter homes again. This is to protect us from walking into possible illegal activities or from physical attacks. Petitioning is an excellent entry point to getting contact information when you're doing door-to-door. So having campaigns such as Keep 28 when you do door-to-door and having that petition is a great way to get that information without being imposing to people. And the door-to-door organizer has to always be ready to ask people to join our organization and able to articulate why they should join the organization. Another type of outreach is social media. Cyber outreach is relatively new, and it's a method of implementing outreach in cyberspace. And there are several different ways that you could do social media outreach, such as Facebook, Eventbrite, Instagram, MailerLite. Many times people confirm for events on Facebook, but are out of the area where the event is happening. So when acquiring social networking information, make sure that your local list is available for easy access when promoting local events and meetings so that you can send things to people personally as well as sending things out to like a mass broad audience. Also, social media requires large numbers of contacts in your base, since some people who get your notices will never attend. Text messaging outreach is very effective when you deal with the youth who are not used to telephone calls and who are not used to just face-to-face interactions with organizing. So one good method when dealing with younger people is also text messaging to get them to come out to meetings and things like that. We've only seen limited results with cyber outreach when you use it as the single method of outreach, so it should always be used in conjunction with one of the other methods that we mentioned. Okay, and now I'm gonna let Connor go.
I have my notes, I think. Ahuru, everyone. Move this. Hi, my name's Connor Voss, and I'm the chair of the International Recruitment and Membership Office for the Ahuru Solidarity Movement, which is the mass organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee, white people organizing under the leadership of the Party for Reparations. And I'm going to present a little bit about the follow-up process that we use in both the Ahuru Solidarity Movement and that INPDUM, the International People's Democratic Ahuru Movement, uses. And before I jump into that, I just really want to salute my leadership, the chairman, for developing a lot of this. All of what I'm presenting is coming from the model of interaction and organizing that has been developed by the party over the past 50 plus, even longer years. So I do want to note that and also tie it a little bit back to the comment the chairman made earlier today about how colonialism distorts our relationships and really breaks down trust between individuals in families and in communities. And part of what we're doing when we're building recruitment is mending those relationships, whether we're white people talking to other white people, or in other organizations doing, other types of anti-colonial work. And I also want to salute my leadership in the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess, who's really pioneered new ways for white people to talk to other white people and build relationships that are really principled even within white society. So that's the model that we're working from. So follow-up is really important. A lot of people think organizing is about like some spectacle, some big protest, but the real work, as the chairman has said over and over again, and it has sort of taught me, is in many ways the grind of building trusts that the organization has with the masses and building long-term relationships. So it's not just wham bam, thank you ma'am, like a big event. It's building that relationship and nurturing it and being there, being the stable anchor for the people. So that is what follow-up is all about. Okay. Yeah. So this is the 24-hour contact management timeline that we use. This is basically because you have a pretty small window after you meet somebody to really effectively bring them in, and we want to follow up with people pretty quickly. This ensures that they understand we have a professional organization and that we take this really seriously. And even if you're not really urgent with them, if you follow up urgently and quickly after you meet them, you communicate the urgency of the revolutionary process. And they know that they're going to respond to you sooner and that you are moving quickly, and it's on them to catch up with you. So, this is why our contact management timeline is so much faster than other organizations. So the first step is to get contacts. At every event we do, we want to gather people's contact information. This is a security measure, but it's also just part of how we work, and it allows us to follow up with people. So outreach at events, tables, any online activity, social media, we're gathering contacts. You can ask for people's emails on Facebook Messenger or when you're texting with them. We're just trying to build those. If you meet someone out on the street, if you're out doing something completely different, you're still organizing, you can still get their contact information, their phone number. You want to establish a relationship right off the bat. When's a good time to talk to you? When do you work? Like, when can I call you to say more about this? It's an ongoing, it's not just like we end it after we meet. We're going to continue the conversation. So that informs how we interact with people even when we first meet them. We want to record everything legibly. Sometimes we hand over a contact sheet and someone scribbles it down. If they're giving you their contact, they're expecting you to call them. So we need to be able to do that. So we want to record everything legibly, even check it and be like, hey, I don't know if I can read this. Anyway. So yeah, and then as Chiwaniso said, I also want to really appreciate, I'm sorry I didn't do this before, Chiwaniso for preparing this presentation and providing leadership to this process. So, Ahuru Chiwaniso. And also in developing this, Chiwaniso played a key role in providing leadership to USM's strategy and to how we're doing this, so I want to salute you for that. The second step is, as soon as we get home, we put the contacts into our database, whether it's MailerLite, HubSpot, whatever, whether it changes, we have to have that accountable database. This allows the party to understand all of our contacts, know who we're talking to, because we're not just going out there and building our yoga class mailing list for ourselves. We're building the organization. We want to input everything that we know, including any narrative notes. So not just phone number, that's it. If you had a conversation, put down what you talked about. Put down a little bit about that so the next person understands what the relationship is. And new members have to go to the national office. And if you have people that need to be referred to another organization or something like that, they need to go to those organizations within 24 hours so that the national office can carry out, or international office can carry out the necessary protocols. In terms of follow-up, we want to also follow up within 24 hours. The preference is to make a phone call, but then a secondary option, if you can't reach them via phone, would be to text or do a Facebook message, and then the last option is email, which is the least personal of the three. We want to keep building that really personal connection. When we follow up, we want to invite them to an orientation where they can learn more about the whole history of the movement, which we'll talk about in a second. We want to provide a volunteer opportunity where they can get involved and put their hands really on the work. Ahuru. So within 1 week, we want to report. This is a really key part, especially for new organizers, to sum up contacts at your local and regional meetings. And I want to really salute the regional strategy of the chairman's recent political report, because it creates this whole regional opportunity to sum up contacts that are coming into areas where there may not be a strong active presence. So contacts need to be brought to local and regional meetings to be summed up. It's part of the standard party agenda to discuss contacts. It's a big way that we discuss and build how we talk to people. And when people ask questions like, can I learn more about the party, send it to them. When people ask, can I learn more about the question of the colonial oppression of African women or the prison system or something like that, you can continue to follow up with them urgently and answer all their questions. So engagement in the work. This has also been mentioned throughout yesterday's presentation, but we want to get people's hands on the work, tie them to responsibilities and accountable structure so that they can begin to learn things like democratic centralism and their role. Many people have never experienced accountability, especially, working with white people. Like, we don't experience accountability in white society. We can get away with all sorts of things. That's what white society is founded on, is getting away with violence. So, you know, that affects our personal relationships, and tying people to accountable structures or involving them in participation is really important. So as soon as they join, they get a welcome letter, and the packet will contain a welcome membership card, which they can put in their wallet. And now they're a card-carrying member of an organization. They're not just some guy you met on the street. A button or a sticker, a copy of the Constitution, so they can dig in more, platform, mission statement, a calendar of upcoming events as well as national events, and a flyer for a current campaign. So orientations are something that right now is held mostly nationally, but actually after yesterday's presentations, I think there needs to be a conversation as well about, I think local organizations should be able to hold orientations as well. But when people join, they probably won't know that much about what they're joining other than what you've shared with them. So orientations allow them to know what they're a part of, and we have to share that with them. We can express that this is the beginning of their journey to understand more about African liberation. There's no bad questions. I mean, that's what we'll say in an orientation. No, but it's real. We want people to feel open to provide their feedback, and it's a place for people to ask questions. Connect people with appropriate committees, share current campaigns, upcoming events. We have a slide for each upcoming event where we can go into more detail about it, and introduce new forces to other parts of the organization. When an outreach person in San Diego meets someone, they come to orientation, then they get to meet me. I'm living in Philly. I'm the membership coordinator, and so they begin to see the relationships between the different parts of the organization, and that's key for understanding their own place. Weekly meetings show structure, show regularity, and allow people, even new people who are just coming to their first event, to see how much work the party is doing to build, to create structures, to institutionalize this process and African self-determination. So weekly meetings are really important in terms of recruitment. Also, one thing I'll say about weekly meetings also is that that's where most of our recruitment happens, at least in the Solidarity movement, is when people come to a meeting and you can have those more intimate discussions where people are not rushed and they've actually planned on being there. Political education, I mean, we're all responsible for studying the theory of African internationalism. It's what wins people, it's what brings us all together, it's the reason that we're here. And every event, meeting, or action, even like a brief action, even a small briefing on the phone, even a check-in, should begin with some acknowledgement of the larger overarching goals and political strategy. And it's what motivates our members and supporters to take on responsibility for areas of work, not just doing a task, not just filling out this thing, not just printing, not just one thing, but seeing and taking responsibility for an area of work. That's what political education really can provide. So we want to choose current and relevant topics, whether it's Amazon moving out of the oppressed African community in Queens, New York, is something in New York that we're talking about. There's so many things you can use and you can apply African internationalism to. You want to choose your political education to mobilize people, to provide unity to the group. And don't shy away from struggle. If there's something that's coming up in the group, choose an article or from the Burning Spear that really addresses that. So campaigns are really significant because they focus the energy of the movement or the organization on one specific topic. All campaigns should have recruitment goals so that we're involving the membership and recruitment work, and it's tied into the campaign, and that the campaign doesn't exist as some thing that's not tied into democratic centralism. Campaign victories are important. They bolster the long term. This is a long struggle, so campaigns show new forces and members victories in the short term, which are so crucial. New forces are often brought in with an investment in that campaign, and so they should be encouraged or won to take on work in that campaign in the place that they came into as soon as possible. And then follow up after the campaign, and also during the campaign, should consolidate the gains from the campaign into the larger strategy. So someone comes in through a campaign, they can also see the whole picture. And they can see how that campaign, relates to the picture, is actually not just a way to win people outside, but actually to deepen the work and build a relationship with the community. That's fundamental to the organizing we do. Oh, Keep 28 is a great example of a campaign like that. So again, our events are going to be timely, topical, and themed. They're going to be concretely related to what someone on the street you're doing outreach to is invested in and interested in and dealing with. So yeah, we want to plan events that are relevant to current or recent experiences of people you're trying to reach. If it's like Halloween, you can do a Halloween themed event. Or in another way, if there's been a recent act of police terrorism against the African community, you do an event that's themed around that. So Ticharwa gave a brilliant presentation on the NTU volunteer program. And I know in USM, in the political organization, we showed the NTU intro video, which is really essential for people coming in through a political mass organization to understand the economic work, and vice versa for the people coming in through the economic. I mean, it's all tied together, and it really should. The NTU program and the volunteer program really shows that. Member appreciation and recognition. This is not some separate thing. This is how we work. Appreciating our forces and, the salutes that we give and the thank yous and stuff, it's not some addendum. It is fundamental to the way that we see, the people and the significance of the people. So that is a huge part of recruitment. The main reason people leave organizations, they say, is that they don't feel appreciated. So this is something that, this is something the Deputy Chair speaks about a lot. So birthdays, this is great. Birthdays are so important. They seem like something, I don't know, keeping track of that. No, it shows structure. It shows that you are thinking about people. People don't want to be contacted just when you need something from them. We want to be in touch with people when we're celebrating them just regularly, and birthdays are a great, yearly opportunity to do that. You can organize a celebration of your committee or your branch around them. Make sure it's an announcement in a local meeting. You can use Facebook to popularize that, and you can give it a revolutionary spin. Happy Uhuru birthday, happy revolutionary birthday. Post something, really appreciate your work this year on this campaign, and make a gift or something. And on that, membership drives. So in a way, we're in a membership drive all the time. We're constantly driving membership. But a membership drive campaign has the goal of building the confidence and pride of your members in the organization. And they can be focused on a particular membership level, a historic figure. They want to have promotional imagery like you see here. This is from the Ella Baker Drive that we did last year and are in the midst of right now in February. So we have outreach plans. We want to touch all parts of the organization. Everyone needs to know and prioritize that membership level. And yeah, it's really, I think it's really fun and really builds, pride and confidence in our organizers. Thank you. Uhuru.
It's still something back there. Okay, so in conclusion, outreach is a ever ongoing process. From the time we wake up, we should be recruiting. Recruitment is an ever going process. And from the time that we wake up, literally we should be recruiting. And when you do outreach, it's just the first step in a process of what recruitment is, because from the time that someone signs a clipboard, from the time they take a flyer, the recruitment process starts, but it doesn't stop once they sign your clipboard. It doesn't even stop once they fill out an application or become a member, because the end goal is to find people to recruit into the party, and that's an ever ongoing process to develop our forces, to understand what our political theory is, and to really win them and to get their unity. So the first step in recruitment, just the overview of what we just went over, would be to develop and or review organizational goals. Step 2 is to do outreach and do more outreach. Step 3 is to call the people and do follow-up. Step 4 is to immediately engage the members who have signed your clipboard into some type of political work. And step number 5 is to appreciate your members. Anytime you're among the masses is an opportunity to recruit. Uhuru.
So we're going to do a Q&A for this workshop. I thought it was really important. So Connor and Chiwaniso, if you can come back up. We're going to do a 15-minute Q&A. Are there any questions for Connor or Chiwaniso or comments? I thought it was a really important. Yes. Any chat questions or comments as well?
Yeah, I just really want to appreciate the workshop. I think it was very detailed and very in-depth. And also, you know, again, just following the steps and very clear. It was made very clear, visualized, and it doesn't seem so hard after all. Just doing this and the way that you put it out there. And then this is just like the most important. One of the most important things that we do is the recruitment aspect of it, and it should be treasured most definitely. And I think this is part of that process. So I really appreciate this, because without getting to the people and retaining the people, then we end up doing a disservice to the people, and not being able to respond at a full capacity to what we are should to do. So I just really appreciate that.
Everybody who wants a comment or question, just come and line up at this microphone here.
Uhuru, I just want to, again, just say that this membership conference have been very, very good. Leaving out the amazing dynamic 7 Congress, where we have this political report, and just for us to really internalize what we have to do. And I feel like a lot of things have been laid out for us, so we, to put in our tool belt, and a lot of it is, just a refreshing of something that we already probably known, but we really have to fight for our manuals. I think that's just like the theme. The theme of this is that we have manuals, we got to use them, apply science and be professional revolutionaries. And I just really want to salute Connor and Chiwaniso for this workshop right here. And Chiwaniso is the international secretary for my IEC, which is so critical to the work that we do. She works very closely with me, and then she's leading membership right now. And one of the things that we wanted to overturn the contradiction and build a mass movement. And we knew that we had to bring science, manuals, and a POA to that process to do that. And we have already started to experience the magic in that, So, everything that's laid out is stuff that we have in our POA now, and how we gonna, move everywhere to recruit and build a mass movement for EPDM. So I really appreciate this. And I know that EPDM is not the only mass movement that we have in the Uhuru movement. And we want to build all of our mass movements, because Chairman's opening statement, he talked about ANWO and different campaigns that help African women to organize around, and EPDM and APDEP. And it's a way for the masses to be able to participate in revolution and come into a theory to give a worldview. And to me, once you get a theory and have a worldview, it's no other it's no other decision but to join the party. Because once you have that worldview and that theory, then you have to plug yourself into the machine that's going to destroy colonialism. So I really appreciate the science and the depth that we went into in this workshop, to talk about, context, call the people, damn it, because I think that that's something that we dropped the ball on, that we have to really, really overturn. I mean, I know how sometimes it's just the hardest thing, seem like the hardest thing to get started to do is just to pick up the phone and call the people. Like, I dread it sometimes. But what I would say about phone banking, what really helps is to do it collectively. Come to a space where everybody's together, talk about what we're about to say, read the script, so we won't sound like robotic on the phone. And the more you do that, the better results you get. And it helps us to be transparent. It helps us to be accountable to the work. So if any way possible, try to make sure that you're doing phone banking in group settings. And like in St. Louis where we live, sometimes it's absolutely hard to do it because of the weather. Well, Chichara laid out in the interview process yesterday that I want to just plug people back into is the phone banking process that he laid out is something that you call in and you get a summation, everybody says, and then everybody hangs up, phone bank, put it into that system where it's accountable, and then you call back in and get a report, and then and everybody is accountable. So both of these methods are things that we have to do because we're going to see our movement grow when we really understand that contacts is like resources, and nobody take money and just throw it away. You don't just take checks and be like, well, I'll get to it later. You understand the material interest in that resources and why you protect it in that way, and we have to see that with contacts as well. Uhuru.
Uhuru, I want to really unite with everything that Kambai just said, and it's been really great to see this and go more deeply into it. One of the things that we aren't doing in St. Pete in the USM is the Four Corners, and so I really appreciate an explanation of how that's done and that we have a banner. I grew up here in St. Petersburg, but I lived on the way north side of town, and I did not meet the Uhuru movement until I was 40. And so being the chair of the USM here, I need to overturn that contradiction for every other person who's out there who's 20, 25, 30. They don't have to wait until they're 40 years old to meet the Uhuru movement. And so I'm really excited I was like, how do we do that? How do we get out? Because this is not a walking city in the northwest side of the city. But we could take our banner, we can take our bullhorns, we can take the spear, and we can go out there and get contacts, and then we can drop those areas. So this really helped me to see how we could move forward with that. And the other thing that I wanted to say was just this whole overview, Chairman, was really important to me yesterday of defining who we are. Because years ago when I first started, we did not lead with we're a revolutionary organization, but in USM on the tables, I mean, we did, even CUSP didn't say reparations. Now in the recent campaign, we could say reparations. So I really appreciate that sum up of we're in a new period where, even white people, like all of us white people that are already here, that there are more people out there who can hear revolution, can hear it in a different way. And so I feel like leaving this, just the kind of conversations that I'll be able to have with people on the tables are going to be so different, and I'm hoping that I can communicate that to the team here in St. Pete as well. Uhuru.
Uhuru, I really want to appreciate this conference, the chairman of the party, APSC, and for this workshop. And I have two questions, both having to do with trusting new members and contacts and bringing them into the work while being security conscious. So I know that a lot of phone banking with mass forces is used on like spreadsheets as opposed to our databases. And then also on social media, friending people as a form of outreach. In terms of like, who, should get access to what we should trust people with, is like, keeping lots of notes and spreadsheets. We don't want important information getting lost in that. And then also for, friending on social media, I know when someone friends me and I don't know who they are, I'm a little like, a little freaked out and don't accept them. And I know a lot of other people who are the same way, who are not involved in an organization, but I know that it works. And like, especially when like sharing to 20 groups and people liking it, to friend every single person who liked it, I know is something that is done. So I wanted to hear more about like a strategy behind that in terms of remaining security conscious, but also getting the word out to people, using that as outreach, and also like spreadsheets versus our database, Uhuru.
Everybody make sure your phone is turned down or turned off, please.
Uhuru. One way as far as phone banking to be security conscious is knowing who has access to your database and being able to understand how you can, for example, we use Google Sheets a lot, and you can grant access in certain ways, like where you can't copy documents, where you can't print out documents. So that's one way. And I know that one thing that we included in our POA was the contact database management, where you actually have a list of who has access to what so that you can easily revoke access. And also to have people sign something, letting them understand the seriousness of what they're, what they have access to, and giving some type of accountability to that person. I hope that answered your question. You said you wanted to speak there.
Yeah, we instituted a database access contract that anyone who has access to certain databases that have resources, either financial resources or contact information, so anyone who has access to a certain number of contacts needs to fill out that form. But at a low level, like local level, it's important that people deputize their forces to call people and to continue those processes, even if they don't have that higher level. Like even if you have new people, they can participate in phone banking. You can just give them a contact sheet or a few contacts and just maintain the accountability and the reporting, so you know what happens with that. Regarding Facebook and like adding people and stuff like that, I mean, we just have to focus on getting people off of social media. So you can build the social media outreach, but build it so that they come to a meeting and meet you, and then maintain your relationship on terms that you can set, rather than just on Facebook or something like that. Because otherwise, then Facebook, blocks you, and what? You've lost your meeting. You've lost, how does that? So I think that's really important, that all of our social media work should be focused on, building real connections and relationships with people. And also the decorum around like friending people, like just friend everybody and message them all, and just I think people respond really well, or I've noticed people respond really well to just like get it out there. We're trying to get the people, this is urgent, we want to get you, we want to talk to you. So I think that type of attitude is really effective.
Uhuru. We have two questions, one from Mads in Portland, who says, Uhuru, salute this presentation. I really appreciate the aspect of outreach being the best political education. What can we do as leaders in our region to instill revolutionary confidence for new comrades or forces who think they don't know the movement well enough to do tabling/outreach? And then the next question is from Ushindi in New Jersey, asks, can you speak more to fear of the masses when it comes to doing outreach and recruitment, and how to really overturn that in a local mass organization committee?
Okay, so the first question was about, okay, revolutionary confidence. Okay, so for revolutionary confidence, the most important aspect is political education. I mean, people don't have the confidence because they don't have the political education to be able to go out and spit the line. And I know that when I first joined the organization, that was one of my main catalysts, is because I came from somewhere else. So my theory was flawed, and I didn't have the confidence to go out and do the work because I was using a different theory. But really just through the chairman's studies, through having a sponsor with Columbi, and also just having my own personal political education through the books and everything else that the Uhuru movement provides, there's almost no way to not have the confidence to go out and to speak the theory. The second question was about fear of the masses, and I think that ties into the first question. And I think the reason that you fear the masses is because you're not politically educated. So I think to get over that fear, number one, you just have to go out and do it, because when you're amongst the people, you're amongst your people. And I think that the feeling that you get when you're amongst the masses, for me anyways, is overwhelming. And it's just such a great love for the people, but you can't get that until you go out amongst the people. And I think that's just how you get over the fear. You politically educate and you go out and you do it. Uhuru.
I just wanted to really appreciate this workshop and appreciate the chairman of the party, since the article I remember first coming into the movement was the organization of organizers, and chairman doing political education is really taking on how you go out to people, how you dress, how you smell, how you whatever, that's all part of it. And I just really appreciate all of this being put into protocols and science, that can be for all of our organizations. And I just had a couple things that reminded me. One was that I really appreciate Deputy Chair has instituted a lot of, in our meetings with mass people, as like icebreakers or things where you really engage with the people more. And that's something I think is really important, even when we're doing phone banking, that we get to know people, get to know who they are, their interests, what brought them there, and that helps us to organize them too, more, and that's really important too. And have that friend and openness instead of talking at people, which I think we do too much. That was one thing. And then the other thing I just wanted to really unite with around the security on contacts, because I think, one, when we're out, if you're out somewhere, like when we're out, for example, with the Uhuru Foods and Pies, when we raise money, we bring the contact sheets back in with the money. We consider them like money. So it's like anytime you're out, that comes back and gets put in a locked file cabinet. It gets either, if you're scanning it, it doesn't just get you don't allow them to lie around an office or be accessible to other people. And I know you talked about, and something I just think we should have as part of our protocols, contracts. Some people do background checks for people who are going to be over databases, and also just having them alias, making sure that everybody who responds to contacts has an alias or something there you can control the access, and that it's also coming organizationally, not individually, so that people aren't able to organize people to themselves, that kind of thing. So I just really appreciate, and think that we should make sure we include security on the contacts as part of our protocols. Uhuru.
Uhuru, I just wanted to piggyback on what Chiriniso, I unite with everything Chiriniso was saying about confidence. And one of the things that we took on in the new POA for EPDM mass organization to really push the confidence and for people to be able to understand what EPDM is, to tell somebody else about it, is orientation. And in the orientation, we want people in the orientation, at the end of the orientation, every person on the IEC provides orientations for, Google Docs, how to chair a meeting. Because the more confidence that you have, the more training that you have, and you think that you can do it, the more you're willing to go out and do it. And so that was another thing that I just wanted to say, that, like the phone banking thing, and I wanted to throw my phone at him for it. Like I was really like, no, I can't, because I'm so used to just saying I can't do anything. And when you come to the Uhuru movement, you're going to find out that just get over it, because ain't nobody going to accept it. Ain't nobody going to accept you saying that you can't do something. Like, it just don't work. They will find a way. Like, you going to do it. And so, I was like, cadre don't say they don't do it. Okay, Chichara, I'm going to do it. And he walked me through the steps, and I have confidence in doing it And now I want to do it, and I want to tell other people to do it. So that's how it works. Like, that's how confidence is built. So we want to give and that's one of the things that I see in deputy chair office, and why she have dynamic forces and she lead a really tight ship, is because she really makes sure that people have training to do what it is that she asks them to do. So I think that that's one of the ways confidence is built. And on the security question, I unite that, and that's the reason why I was saying doing, try to do your phone banking, at like the Uhuru House if you have one, or at the library, if you have a space to do it, because what you do is you get yourself prepared and you print out the database sheets. And then you have a person that is the operator of the whole operations that's walking around, that's watching everybody, phone banking and stuff. And you kind of get an eye. And I try to bring this procedure from cadre development school, because that's what we did here. And I seen that was a really good strategy. People had lists, and then they call, and then they put it in the database. And it's kind of a way for us to make sure that we got those sheets back. And then Chiriniso is good with spreadsheets and security stuff, and she's paranoid about everything anyway. So, like making sure that I know when you looked at the database, I know who, that we don't ever, give somebody access to something and then we like, oh shoot, what do we do? You know what I'm saying? So making sure that we have ranks in our organization, and we're talking about the mass organization, so we have ranks. So making sure that, lower ranking file people don't have access over your whole database, and then you just out, and then make it, maybe we could talk about giving people steps so they can know how to make sure that people can't make a copy of their database. So we can do that. We should make sure that everybody here knows how to have it so that no one can make a copy of it after you sent it to them in an email. Then they can't copy it, at all. So it's ways that we can do that, and so we should definitely make sure that we add that in our security protocol.
Okay, last two questions, and they need to be very concise. Or comment.
Uhuru, I was just wondering if this outreach PowerPoint, if it's something that we could use like in a meeting of USM, a local meeting, to kind of show people the overview of what outreach is about and why it's done. It's really beautifully laid out. So.
All of the PowerPoints and all the presentations are going to be made available to the people in the meeting. So APSC will have that, USM will have it, so everybody will get access to that.
I just want to appreciate the comrades for the report and the workshop. My question is how to be personal without being subjective, building these relationships and making sure we stay on a political objective.
I think one way that we could do that is through, one of the ways we discussed is through mobilizing through issues. And I think the issues are a very personal thing that all African people can relate to. Like, we all can relate to poor housing, we can relate to police brutality, and those are things that without even knowing can be very personal to somebody. If you bring up police brutality, you don't know if somebody has a family member who's been a victim of it. So I think by uniting people around the theory of African internationalism, because it is a worldwide theory, I think is one way that's already very personal for me. Like, when I heard the theory, it resonated. And like, for mass organizations, everybody has a platform. Like, Impedum has a very vast platform, and there's something on Impedum's platform that applies to everybody. Like, there's nobody who's left out of that platform. So I think if you stick to the platform of Impedum, it's very personal to people and just using issues.
You had something, Tim? Okay. That was great. And we really want to appreciate Connor and Chiriniso. So we're going to break for lunch, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock sharp. All right, Uhuru, comrades. My bad. 2 o'clock. Yeah. So one of the mass forces, Johnny X, he'll be here for 45. He'll take you.